time that you're investing in getting together with us. We've got a couple of elected officials in the room, and I just real quickly wanted to identify Vice Mayor Scott Anderson, and of course, Councilmember Jim Torres. A little bit of that later on in the day. We've got a great individual from Urban 3 here to do this presentation. But ultimately, the idea is through this body of work, Gilbert is and will continue to be fiscally sustainable. And that is obviously, from a built environment perspective, not an easy endeavor to do. Through our conversations and our dialogue with Urban 3, the results culminated in a presentation that was provided to the entire staff, as well as in a two-day work group or work session with council, not quite in a retreat-like format, not as formal, but a little less formal in the form of a working session. And you will see a lot of what we did in that working session with council brought here today to engage you in a similar or like way. Urban 3 is in town again to present the findings that they conveyed to us as a community about our economic productivity and different things that we can begin to apply as we contemplate that built environment, particularly things like return on investment, as well as sort of defining return on investment by acre. And so our agenda today includes, again, a reorientation of the varying roles of the Redevelopment Commission and Planning Commission, and identifies those areas with which they overlap and essentially complement each other. We will then roll into a dinner dialogue about how you all approach your agenda packets and the design review cases. We're going to take you through a land use exercise that we completed with council during that workshop, and we'll hear from Urban 3. Finally, we will end our evening with an update related to Heritage District parking, and again, appreciate all of the time, attention, and your participation today. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Ashley McDonald, our principal planner.
All right, thank you. So as Dan said, I'm Ashley McDonald, principal planner. I'm going to tag team this presentation with Veronica, my counterpart, so she'll be up here in just a little bit, so you don't have to hear me the whole time. But we're going to talk about the Planning Commission tonight, the roles of the town in the development process, the internal process that applications go through before they get to a hearing body, so redevelopment or Planning Commission, depending on the item. An overview of the planning case types, and then the next steps, what happens after it goes before Planning Commission, Redevelopment Commission, before it starts to be built. So the Planning Division on average receives about 25 to 45 new cases every month, and we have just about 200 active planning projects at any one time divided amongst our staff. Of these cases, there's only about 1 or 2 active Heritage District projects at any one time. So a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about today that's specific to the Heritage District covers a very small geographic area, which is what makes that area so special, right? We are able to dedicate in planning 1 staff member that oversees our projects in the downtown. That's Kristen Devine, so Redevelopment Commission knows her well. Planning Commission does as well, but she handles the bulk of our projects that occur in the Heritage District, and that really allows us to have continuity across the district as we apply those standards. So as we start to talk about development within the district, we have a lot of tools in our toolbox. It starts high level. Our general plan is our visioning document that applies across the town. That's a voter adopted plan. I'll cover it in a little bit more detail as we go along. But we also have the Heritage District Redevelopment Plan. That also provides kind of a high level overview or visioning plan for the Heritage District. From there we go into our implementation standards. So those include our documents such as our Land Development Code, the Gilbert Municipal Code, we've got Heritage District Design Guidelines, along with commercial, industrial, residential guidelines. And then we've also got implementation tools such as our Capital Improvement Plan, our Infrastructure Improvement Plan. We have a Shade and Streetscape Master Plan, and any future or current studies that are ongoing that help shape development within the town. So how do we get from all of those documents to development, the really fun stuff that all of our residents love? Starting with that high-level overview, our general plan provides broad guidance as staff reviews projects. The Heritage District specifically is identified as a growth area and a character area. We use that as we review these projects. So this is just kind of, there's no specifics in this plan, but it includes things such as the Heritage District will create a place that is pedestrian and bicycle oriented, that it promotes development of underutilized space, creates a place where residents feel a sense of community. So as we're reviewing projects in the district or across the town, we're keeping these things in mind and providing comments that help us achieve these things. Dialing it in a little bit more, there is the redevelopment plan. This is a 10-year document. The current plan that we have is plans through 2028. It is the 4th iteration of the plan, and it sets specific strategies for redevelopment and includes short and long-term goals, similar to the general plan. From a planning perspective, this plan, again, guides the feedback that we provide to our development projects. Specific to the redevelopment plan, it outlines public amenities such as the Commons open space, which we'll talk about a little bit more, the Paseo that runs from the south end of the district to the north end. And so this is how we get some of those things in our projects, is by leaning on this document. Then looking at some of our implementation tools, this is our Land Development Code. Although the Land Development Code covers the town as a whole, some Heritage District specific sections or items include our Heritage Village Center zoning district. That makes up the bulk of the district. We also have a section that outlines the overlay. So all of the Heritage District is within an overlay district. You can see that there are some pockets, kind of the yellow area, that's single family residential. So in the Heritage District, there are different standards for single family residential because of that overlay. So different lot sizes, different setback requirements, things like that. We also have parking that applies across the entire town, but specific to the Heritage District. There are sections that allow for off-site parking within the Heritage District. So we allow, in certain circumstances, for developments to off-site their parking if it's within a certain distance of their use, and the town has capacity to absorb that parking requirement. We also have specific sign regulations for the town, and then some that dial into the Heritage District specifically. Any sign in the Heritage District requires a heritage sign plan. We'll cover a little bit later what that process looks like. And then it outlines the procedures for Redevelopment Commission and Planning Commission. So this is what the portion of the code that kind of that governs the different zoning district looks like. Within each zoning district, we have height regulations, setback regulations, and so that applies across the town. Every zoning district has this type of regulation.
shut it down. Antifa. First, actually, I might have said George Soros. He's like, oh man, if anybody looked like Senator Palpatine, it's that guy. You know, they got all the dinner out there, it's gonna be so cold. It's ridiculous.
She's like, you live in an HOA area?
I would just,
You're gonna.
Well, we're gonna follow the lineage of
That's a good concept.
Yes.
I think it's fair to say that.
Otherwise.
I can't have land, we gotta have.
Similar style of authenticity. So it's just depends if you like. Getting there is a nice place to live.
Okay.
Good food. Right?
Years ago, there was a HOA.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess, my parents' house is still 65, I don't know if they really got popular.
No.
Yeah, try to get one of those. My first house was a condo.
Really expensive.
Yeah, and some really. Discover something.
So fiber fewer typically, right? More than that, is that it?
Yeah, because it's, it's a C-section.
Oh, good, it's okay, yeah.
Because it's a lot.
I think the presentation.
I know my first guitar is
That makes you feel free
That's something that I want to develop. Not to go get Christina. So one should do, but this way you're going there. These things you gotta see, If we wanted,
my pride is I love it.
I never got involved in it.
it's the same story. In some cases,
I don't know.
provided this kind of thing. I see all the same stories there that you see.
There's a sense of
Okay, I think we are ready. Thank you for your patience. So before we dive into the specific case types, I wanted to show you just a quick video. It's pretty short. This talks about the adopted design guidelines for the Heritage District. These are a really critical component for the review of our projects as we seek to create a sense of place in our downtown.
for rival when you enter Gilbert's downtown heritage district, a feeling of glimpsing the past while celebrating the future. a feeling of community connectedness, of creative energy, of history, of Gilbert's heartbeat. In 2018, Gilbert's Town Council adopted an updated Heritage District redevelopment plan, and in order to ensure the character of the downtown reflected this plan, a new set of design guidelines were developed. This was not the typical government document that reads like a foreign language, but rather a foundation for architectural character that ensures adherence to town codes and standards while simultaneously making the guidelines both succinct and broadly applicable. The document is divided into 4 sections: commercial development projects, public space projects, residential development projects, and an appendix. The guidelines challenge conventional suburban planning via the focus on a human-scale walkable environment that provides residents options for an urban lifestyle. It utilizes axonometric drawings and inspirational photography to convey the anticipated development standard and quality. It creates a tapestry in which not all areas of the 0.3 square mile district are the same. The streets are designated as a certain type, and the experience of the street is explained, while the Heritage District character is interwoven. And while most design guidelines focus on commercial and residential spaces, these guidelines ensure the public's vision for public spaces are memorialized. Retaining the small town feel was a primary concern of the public. Staff achieved this by requiring turn-of-the-century architecture on Main Street, incorporating red brick design features in each street type, incorporating curbless streets around public spaces, and designating spaces for curbside mom-and-pop vendors. Gilbert has already seen the success of the adopted design guidelines and a recently approved $300 million private development at the northern entrance of the district, whose character reflects the charming spirit of the Gilbert community. As the district continues to build out, the guidelines will ultimately preserve what makes Gilbert unique and will ensure visitors and residents say, "I want to return to downtown Gilbert."
The narrator did a great job on that.
All right, so with all of that background in mind, we will walk through the various case types, but just to kind of give a broad overview of that, there are a number of items that come before you as Redevelopment Commission, Planning Commission, and then a number of items that are approved administratively by staff. So those items that go to public hearings include our general plan amendments, our rezonings, design review, for kind of an initial or a master site plan, conditional use permits, preliminary plats. Heritage sign plan could actually be in both categories. That one's unique. If a development is meeting all of the standards of our sign code, then we can approve that administratively. Heritage sign plans allow an applicant to seek some deviations, and if they do that, it comes before the board. So that one actually should be listed in both. And then administrative actions include administrative design review. So if it's part of a master site plan, one of our hearing bodies has already seen it, and we're looking to just refine the plan, add in elevations for a building that maybe they didn't have them initially. We've got minor admin design review applications, so that's an approved plan that we're making just some minor tweaks on. And then there's administrative use permits. So those are the things that staff does without Planning Commission or Design Review Board input. So as we look at the roles of our Redevelopment Commission specifically, and we'll talk about Planning Commission next, they receive their authority through Arizona revised statutes, and they've got powers through that. But additionally, here in Gilbert, they serve as our design review board, reviewing again those design review applications that are within the Heritage District, and then they look at heritage sign plans. Redevelopment Commission serves as a recommending board for our general plan amendments, rezonings, and use permits for projects that are in the district. They make those recommendations that then go to Planning Commission. And then they serve as Heritage District advisors on a variety of things. It includes the redevelopment plan when we're working through that, capital improvement projects, any Heritage District plans or studies, such as parking studies. And then the role of the Planning Commission. So they, again, are a recommending body on our general plan amendments, rezoning applications, and then those ultimately go to Town Council. They are the decision-making body on preliminary plats and use permits. They serve as the design review board on design review cases, sign plans, standard plans outside of the district. So Planning Commission won't see design review, sign plans, those types of things that are within the Heritage District. And then Planning Commission also serves as our Board of Adjustment, so you hear our appeals from decisions of the zoning administrator or the zoning hearing officer. The internal process, just to give you some understanding about what a project goes through before it gets to a hearing. If it's a rezoning application or a general plan amendment, they are required to hold a neighborhood meeting. The applicant holds that meeting, staff attends so we can hear some of that feedback. That typically occurs before a pre-application meeting, but in some instances it'll happen after the pre-application meeting. After that, they go to staff for that pre-application meeting. It's a formal submittal. They'll provide us a site plan and we do our internal review. It includes reviews by planning, engineering, traffic, building and fire, and then any others as needed. Sometimes water resources needs to get involved or environmental services, for example. Once they get all that information from us, they'll move on and submit a formal application where we start an actual review process. They've incorporated some of the feedback they hear at that pre-app meeting, and it goes through that same review body for the most part. Planning, engineering, traffic, building, environmental services, always reviews it as part of this process, as does water resources. We'll send back comments, and so it kind of goes in this review process until staff feels satisfied that they've addressed our comments. We'll take it to RDC for study session or planning commission, depending on where the project is, to receive preliminary feedback. We try and do that about the time of first review. So sometimes if we're in front of you and you're like, gosh, this doesn't seem like it's close to being ready, why is it here? It's because we want your feedback early in the process. Our applicants are more likely to make changes to their development if they get that feedback early, rather than after they've gone through 3 reviews with staff. So we try and get it to you guys early so they can get your feedback. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Veronica, and she's going to walk through all of the case types.
Thank you, Ashley. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Veronica Gonzalez. I'm the other principal planner. And as Ashley noted, I will be going through the different case types that use the Redevelopment Commission and the Planning Commission will see. So the first one I'm going to talk about here is the rezoning and general plan amendment case types. These case types typically include requests to change the land use designation and or zoning district. They're typically to allow different land uses or change the intensity of the development, and they're ultimately approved by the town council. When an applicant intends to submit a request to rezone and or change the land use designation, the process begins with a neighborhood meeting. This is where the applicant will invite all property owners within 300 feet of the site, in addition to homeowners associations within 1,000 feet. They come to a meeting, the applicant provides a presentation and will answer any questions that the public might have about that. Once they've completed their neighborhood meeting, they then are eligible to submit for a pre-application meeting. After they have their pre-application meeting, they are now eligible to submit their formal review, which kicks off their staff review. Once the staff review occurs, for developments in the Heritage District, all and properties within 1,000 feet of the Heritage District boundaries, these case types will go to the RDC for recommendation before they go to the Planning Commission, and then eventually on to the Town Council for that final approval. In considering these case types, the purview of the hearing body is to determine if the requested change in land use and zoning makes sense in the location that they are proposing, and is it consistent with the general plan? The recommendations that may be made include approval with modified conditions, denial, or continuance. I'd also like to note that with this type of case, or with this case type, a rezoning, things like modifying land uses or development standards may not be done through conventional rezoning such as this. So rezonings may also include a planned area development or PAD overlay. And this is the mechanism or tool that could be used to request modifications to development standards, regulations, in order to achieve outstanding development that we see would be a benefit to the community. The process for a PAD rezoning is essentially the same as a conventional rezoning. It begins with a neighborhood meeting before moving on to a pre-app and then staff review, recommendation by the RDC before going on to the Planning Commission and then the Town Council. In addition to modifications that may be requested through the PAD, a PAD may also take into consideration phasing of the development. It may address on and off-site improvements and establish design guidelines. However, land uses, parking ratios, signs, and fence and wall regulations may not be modified. Just like with conventional rezonings, the hearing body actions for these case types are again approval with modified conditions, denial, or continuance. Next, we have design review cases. Here we consider the site plan, landscape plan, grading and drainage, lighting, building elevations, colors, materials for building. Neighborhood meetings are typically not required for a design review case, so they can go right into the pre-app step. That's their first step before their formal submittal, staff review. And then for those cases in the Heritage District, during the first review, as Ashley had mentioned, we will schedule a study session with the Redevelopment Commission because it's the early stages of the review and that's the point at which to start making some modifications to the elevations. Once all of the comments from the Commission and staff have been addressed, the case will then be scheduled for a public hearing. In these case types, the role of the Commission is to provide comment and eventually approve the architecture, site plan, landscape palette, building materials, and building colors and materials. And then the action taken by Commission is either approval with modified conditions, denial, or continuance. And just to kind of give you some examples of how those documents how we work with those documents through the design review process. I'm sure you're all familiar with this. This is the Heritage North project. So on the left-hand side there is kind of the earlier iteration of the plan. And what you're seeing here is that it's now Water Tower Way. It was at the time called Paseo, but it's a pedestrian connection that kind of connects the Heritage District, the length of the Heritage District. So in those first iterations, you're seeing it kind of doesn't go all the way through, but working with staff and getting comments and feedback, you can kind of start to see some of the changes that take place that you can see happen through a review. Again, some building renderings of the Heritage North project. Again, you can just kind of see the transition from earlier versions of the proposal to what eventually got approved. And finally, this is a recent approval by the Redevelopment Commission. This is a bowling restaurant concept at the corner of Hearn and Gilbert Road. What they've done here is they've taken some of the elements from the Heritage District Design Guidelines and incorporated into them to make it more in conformance with those design guidelines that we have. And this bottom right picture is what ultimately was approved. Next, we have conditional use permits. These are required for uses that need special consideration to ensure they don't interfere or have any kind of negative impact on surrounding properties. Similar to the case types discussed earlier, the process for CUP is to start with a pre-app before moving on to formal submittal, staff review, And then it goes to the Redevelopment Commission for a recommendation before moving on to the Planning Commission for a final decision. In reviewing a conditional use permit request, the commission must consider if the request meets certain findings of fact. These findings include determining if the use will be detrimental to the health, safety, general welfare, conformance with the general plan, and if the proposed use will interfere with the use and enjoyment of nearby properties. The RDC makes a recommendation of approval with modified conditions, denial or continuance to the Planning Commission, and then again, Planning Commission makes the final decision. We do have a few case types that are reviewed administratively or at a staff level. One of these case types is the administrative design review. These cases include revisions to already approved DR cases. We ensure that they are consistent with the original approval. Sometimes these will include new structures or additions of 5,000 square feet or less. They also can include things like the Heritage Sign Plan or HSP, as Ashley had mentioned earlier. HSPs that comply with the sign code can be reviewed administratively by staff, as well as any additions and or modifications to any existing HSPs. These cases follow the same internal staff review process, and staff may add conditions of approval. We also have an administrative use permit. These are typically used for things like shared parking. In the Heritage District, it allows parking for a particular property to be provided off-site within town garage or parking area. Incidental dwelling units. They're uses that require special consideration, and again, they have certain findings that they have to meet, and they follow the same internal review process as conditional use permits. There is a neighborhood notice requirement with it, and staff can add conditions of approval. So any decision by the Redevelopment Commission or the Planning Commission can be appealed to the Town Council. Anybody can make an appeal. That could be staff, applicant, anybody who feels aggrieved by a decision that has been made by the hearing body. They have 10 days to submit an appeal from when the decision is made, and then the appeal hearing must take place within 60 days of when they've filed their appeal. So the question we have now is, what happens after the project is approved? Well, the next step in the process is to submit their plans for permit review. They go through that process, then the permits are issued. They can begin construction, and inspections are completed or take place during that process. And then finally, they'll receive their CFO and acceptance of their public improvements. And at that point, you'll get to see the fruits of your labor with the beautiful buildings that have been built throughout the town. That concludes our presentation, and we'd be happy to take any questions or comments you may have.
Ashley and Veronica. Okay, so we are at dinner. Okay, this is the fun part. So if you guys want to go ahead and dish up, get back to your seat, and then we just have some facilitated questions for Planning and Redevelopment Commission on how you guys approach your cases. We thought that would be a good opportunity, and then once we wrap up dinner, we're going to hop right into those Lego exercises. So you guys want to go ahead and line up and.
I hope you're on my team. I'm so good at
This is
Legos.
like lunch.
Oh, well, then go Legos. Start that in the email, we're gonna play with Legos. Legos, I would have not been able to be a couple times.
We gotta wait.
Like celebrating the I was part of my wedding vows 2 weeks ago. With Legos? Yes, thank you for buying me all the Legos that I ever wanted. There's so much Legos in my house.
Okay, guys, get up, go eat.
Lined up in this room. Guacamole, into the lighting.
and start with the table, and then I'll ask those in the back to go ahead and introduce themselves. Well, I'll start with myself while you're finishing up. I'm Amanda Elliott. I oversee redevelopment, and I am the staff liaison to the Redevelopment Commission, and I'm in the Office of Economic Development, so I'll hand it over. I'm going to have Cindy introduce herself.
I work in the Office of Economic Development as a redevelopment project manager, and I specifically work in the Heritage District, so I work with the Redevelopment Commission.
I'm Bo Bigelow. I'm on the Redevelopment Commission for the Heritage District.
I'm Kyle Maris, I'm the Development Services Director.
Ava Kutro, Planning Manager and Staff Liaison to the Planning Commission.
Elena Horquez, one of the Assistant Town Attorneys for Planning Commission.
Mary Goodman, I'm an Assistant Town Manager, and two of the teams that I work with in the town are Economic Development and Development Services.
I'm Louis Duggerbean and I serve on the Planning Commission.
I'm Lisa Gage on the Planning Commission.
Tom Everett on the Planning Commission.
Ryan Anderson, I'm on the Planning Commission.
Leslie Davis, Planning Commission.
TJ Clausen, Redevelopment Commission.
Cassandra Updike, Redevelopment Commission.
Casey Kendall, Redevelopment Commission.
John Simon, Planning Commission.
Noah Munt, Planning Commission.
Jim Torgerson, Town Council.
Dan Henderson, Economic Development.
Veronica Gonzalez, Planning.
Ashley McDonald, Planning.
I'm Scott Anderson, the Vice Mayor and Liaison to the Planning Commission.
I'm Patrick Banjo, the Town Manager.
Mike, we're going to kick it to you.
Hi, I'm Mike Bartol in the Office of Economic Development.
I'm Doris.
Hello, everyone. I'm Clint Emery. I'm with the town with traffic engineering.
Mackenzie Wilson, Office of Economic Development.
Michelle Streeter, Office of Economic Development.
I'm Anna Cooper. I'm just shadowing for the day. Erica Prater, Planner 1.
Nicole Russell, Senior Planner.
Keith Newman, I'm a Senior Planner.
Sal DeSanto, also Planner 1.
Sandra Childers, Planner 2.
Did we miss anybody? Jen?
Nice try.
Doing it. Just kidding. Jennifer Graves, Office of Economic Development.
Jocelyn?
Jocelyn Smith, Office of Economic Development.
And Clint?
I did me.
All right.
I don't need to do it twice.
And our fabulous IT staff to support.
Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Can't get out of this, Adrian.
Well, thank you everybody for coming and hope you're enjoying dinner. I just had a couple of questions and wondered if anybody wants to opine on them. And one is, in general, what is the most commonly occurring concern or issue you may have with a project? And do you have an example of a previous project in which your concern was addressed well? So is there any reoccurring issues, anything that was addressed well, since you have a lot of staff here and we could bring that to our applicants and make sure you have what you need at meetings? Everybody's happy with everything?
Everything's just perfect, wrapped up in a nice little red bow for everyone.
Can we bring up a specific planner's name? Sure. Is it good or bad? Is it me or you?
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Okay.
I mean, I think from the Redevelopment Commission, we frequently get acoustic concerns and questions from more of our neighbors that live in the residences, but.
Okay.
Is that what you're looking for?
Yes.
I guess I'm not sure what you're looking for.
No, that's it. Have we been doing noise studies? Do you need noise studies? Are we just going by what the LDC states and adhering to that?
Yeah, good question. I think we have kind of, how did we just do this with Bottled Blonde? We had discussions about it.
Yeah, we did ask them for a noise mitigation plan.
Okay.
Yeah, in that particular instance. And I think that that's essentially what we've been asking for is how do you plan to mitigate the noise overall?
But I don't think we have like a
formalized.
Yeah, something that's more formal guidance on it.
Okay. Councilmember Torgerson?
One of the problems we have is our noise ordinance isn't really up to date, it isn't correct. Because if you start measuring at the window, what's inside of a window, what's outside of a window, et cetera. And the volume, the decibel readings, realize they triple every time you go up. It needs to be re-looked at. I don't have your answer, but I will say that we have to look at that because bass travels further than treble. And it'll travel through concrete because of the side, the shape of the wave. And we need to come up with something like that because whether they're right or wrong, there are people that feel that they are affected even by Whiskey Row. That distance, and there's some people that are quite a distance away that I hate to admit it, but I've gotten calls saying, can you hear this on my phone? And I can. How do I defend that? I can't, right? But it's not something I can do anything with at this point because it's done. So we do need to look at how we're gonna approach that, and I believe our sign ordinance, or our sound ordinance is unique to this town. I do not believe it's got a comparable thing in the valley. Patrick, am I wrong in that?
Boy, I'd have to, Kyle,
I think you're on.
You think I'm on? Okay.
Yes, we measure from the inside of the structure.
Good thing you didn't say wrong, because I come right across the
But we are a little bit unique in that we measure, I believe, from the inside of the structure, and a lot of other towns that I've been to measure from the property line. There are also height measurements. They measure at, a 5-foot height, because that's where the ear of somebody taller than I am would be, and things like that. So we will certainly take that into consideration, and in the pre-apps and at the beginning, make it noted that there are noise concerns. You will be asked about noise, so have the applicants prepared for that. Are there other concerns people could think of that we could address early on in the process so that it doesn't have to be dealt with when they're in front of the different bodies?
I think more renderings of buildings would be helpful. The more often we can see kind of how that lays out and the push and pull of the building is helpful.
And that is true. When we see the flat drawing, you don't catch the movement and all the design. And then really the renderings, and we try to stress it with applicants, they really help the applicant sell the project.
They sell a project for sure, and especially from Lumberyard last week. That was a tough one to kind of really see what was happening. And in the presentations, often we get to see that rendering, but we don't often have them in our packets.
Okay.
And sometimes that's helpful to kind of understand the building a little better, so.
And it's always good when we hear that from the ruling bodies, because when they hear it from staff, they're like, oh yeah, that's expensive. But we'll say, well, they had a recent meeting. It was brought up that the ruling body would like to see that early on in the package.
Even at the study sessions, I think that's super helpful for us to understand it.
Okay. So noise, renderings, yes.
This is kind of a weird one, but we get a lot of different variation of plants and trees. And in the design guidelines, it specifically says what we are allowed to plant. Now, if the applicant has something that isn't on there, is that something that when it goes later on down the line, that it would not get a permit for it with those plants, or on a final inspection, they would deny it? Or is it just kind of like, we want it as close to this as it is? If it's not, then maybe we'll let it go through.
And on that one, I'm gonna phone a friend, because I actually had that explained to me, I think by Sydney, if you wanna step in.
Yeah, we have some awesome people that are in the building department that are review the plans and make sure that it's in compliance. So for example, we had a recent case, Jamino Gelato, in which they installed plants that weren't part of the approved palette and weren't part of what you approved. So then when C of O was coming, there was an inspection done, it wasn't the correct plants and they had to replant. So that's something that we have some awesome team members that do that follow-up and do that during the C of O process to make sure that they're in compliance.
And Cindy, when it's going through the process and they wanna deviate from the plan list, what do we do then?
Yeah, so that's when you guys see that a lot at Redevelopment Commission. So it is a process that goes at study session and then informal. So they're supposed to present it to you at study session and provide you the information of why are we deviating from the plant palette. And then you guys ultimately would approve it at redevelopment public hearing. So that's something in which, that's why it has to be specified out. You know, you've seen Kristen come up a lot with cactus, I feels like is the big one. You've seen a lot of
I was
cactus
just gonna
deviation.
say,
Yeah.
I've read 2 for reports with totem pole cactus
Yeah.
seem to be popular.
So that's where you guys had with Oso Bowling. In that one, you guys had a lot of questions on, are there spines on this, or there's the information, Oso, why do you want the cactus? And that was something that they weren't quite prepared to give you that information, so staff can do a better job at coaching the applicants and telling them that you really need to explain in your narrative why you want these deviations, so you guys ultimately have that power to deviate.
Thank you, Sydney. Yes, Lisa.
Are the single-family residential design guidelines gonna be updated anytime soon? I think they're like 20-something years old.
Ashley?
We brought that up a time or two in my tenure here at the town. I think there's a desire from staff to take a look at those. You know, finding the time is always the challenge.
Well, we'll be fully staffed in 2 weeks for the first time in the 5 years I've been here, so hopefully.
Saying this.
I know, because I don't think I'm jinxing it, I think I'm assuring it to happen, I'm putting it out there.
Okay.
So, yes.
I've got more of a general question for the Heritage District. I know it's come up on a couple of the most recent projects. I know it used to be a it used to be allowable that projects were allowed to retain offsite. Recently, all the projects have been encouraged or pushed to try and do all their water retention on site. And I know that there's a lot of reports and studies going back and forth. I see it being a greater issue depending on what the result of that report comes back at. And on these really tight sites and small sites, it being extremely challenging if they are forced to retain on site. It'd be interesting to see where, I think there was a group that was hired to do a report on retention offsite and how long we could continue to allow offsite retention. Where is that in that whole process, in the grand scheme of things?
The report is very close to being done.
Okay.
And you're right, we're looking to find ways to increase storage in the Heritage District so we can do more of a regional catch instead of trying to capture that all on site. So that's something we're definitely looking forward to, and as the study kind of wraps up.
Yeah.
And Kyle, I was gonna say, I wish Tom Condit was here, and I've been told he's on the line.
Oh,
So
okay.
Tom, did you have anything you'd like to add?
I'm looking.
The only thing I can add is that the reason that we've had all these discussions is because we have the flood control district in Maricopa County has an ongoing, it's a flood determination study, so they're doing a pretty detailed look at everything pretty much in the northeast section of our community. And that includes the Heritage District. That report is ongoing. At the same time, we've had another consultant working for us doing a separate model. And there were some discrepancies between the models, and those discrepancies were the that we need to have all the downtown development retain all their stormwater, or we could have, in a regional basin, we could have the capability to put all that water in that basin. And things are looking promising, so we're getting very close to a resolution on that.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, boys from above.
You're very welcome.
Does anybody else have anything else? I really appreciate this feedback, but we do have a Lego exercise, and I know Commissioner Gage is very excited about that, and I think it starts at 5:15. I don't want to get us off schedule.
If everyone wanna roll, everyone wants to kind of roll out of dinner and take a break, there's a bathroom right over here and more restrooms downstairs, and we'll reconvene at 5:25 and we'll start the exercise. You got about a 5-10 minute break.
Thank you all. Always been a class, so positive.
I think we have everyone here. Seeing some stragglers come in. But we're gonna split you all into 3 groups, so it's a combination of staff, planning commission, and redevelopment commission, so that you guys can all do this activity together. So you do have a planner at each one of your tables that will help guide you through some of these items, and then also I will be walking around, I can help you out, and then we also have more planning staff that's available to assist you. So we're gonna have 3 separate teams, I'll do that at the end, I'll go through instructions first, just so you don't forget what team you're on. But we have 3 separate sites, these are all sites located within the Heritage District that are all presently vacant. So they range from 8 acres down to 1.6 acres. You are going to build the exact same development on all 3 sites. So it's gonna show you what the development potential is of each site and how you fit each one of those items. So up here on the screen, I'll just go over the sites real quickly for you. So site A is down at the bottom, so this is an 8-acre site that's located at the southeast corner of Elliott and Gilbert Road here. Site B is located directly west of the University Building, so this is about a 3-acre site that's currently overflow parking. And then site C is up there in the corner, it's about 1.6 acres, so you can see it's running along Ash Street. So it's at the south west corner of Ash Street and Vaughn right there. So it's about 1.6 acres, about that 3-acre existing parking area. So all of these sites were selected due to their different sizing and the fact that they're vacant or surface parking, so meant for redevelopment. And what you're all gonna do is develop a mixed-use project on the site. So mixed use is something that we see more of in the Heritage District and is what the preferred type of build form is. So we're gonna have you all build a mixed use project with ground floor commercial. So you're gonna see, I'll walk over if you can all hear me. Each one of your Legos here, you're all gonna have the exact same amount, so it's pre-done for you. Red here, each one of these blocks represents 1,000 square feet of commercial space. Do not pull apart the blocks, there's 4 of them for a reason that equals 1,000 square feet. So you have to make 15,000 square feet of ground floor commercial, work on your mixed use site, and then you have 200 multifamily units. So each one of these blocks represents 1 multifamily unit. I know we have some architects in the room, so for architects, this is supposed to be all-inclusive of stairwells, all of those things. Again, you have the exact amount here. And then this gray over here is parking. So you can either do surface parking or you can do vertical. So the gray represents 4 parking spaces. If you have 1, this is surface parking. Doesn't have a height to it. If you do 2 and you stack it, then it becomes 12 feet. All of the information on what the different blocks mean and what the heights associated with them are included on here. And then you have some optional items. So these 3 are required and you have to use all of them. With parking, you learned from Veronica and Ashley earlier that parking is a little unique in the Heritage District. You can apply to off-site your parking here, but only your commercial. Multifamily is required to self-park. So you can, it says it in the notes as well, you can take out 18 of these little squares. That equals it's somewhere around 70 parking spaces for your commercial, and you can apply for an AUP to offsite them, or you can try to fit them on your site. Another optional, so for each one of your sites, open space is not a requirement in the Heritage District. So if you want to add greenery to your development, then you have the equivalent of 20% open space for each one of your developments. So again, this is an option, it's something if you want to do. We love open space, we love greenery, you can get creative with it, but it's not required. Fire access is really important, so we are including that in this exercise. So you have to have 2 points of access. So for example, if you have a garage, you need to make sure there's a way to get in and get out. You display that through these little roads here. So say for example, you set back your development, you need to make sure to put a road there, make sure how we're getting in and out. And this is gonna be in here. I'm not really good at using these, but I know Ashley has a lot of small children and she knows how to work these, but these are supposed to be able to pry them off in case you start building something and you decide, I don't really wanna do that, I wanna start over.
So lightly put the Legos down.
Lightly push them down, these get really stuck. So each one of the sites, you'll see it on a site plan here, so you can get some context of where you're located. On the boards, it's really hard to see, but we put the setbacks on here for you and we put the build to lines. So in the Heritage District, we have 0-foot setbacks, except for when you're adjacent to residential. So this site here, this 8-acre site, is the only one abutting residential. Black is gonna be your setback, you can't build in the setback.
Your build 2 lines is gonna be in gold, you'll see that, and it's also oriented for you on all of those. That's your build 2 lines. You have to be within that section of the code. So, I know I provide a lot of information, so we have info up here, and we'll be walking around and providing you some insight. Each one of the tables has all this information here, so this is your guide, and we have it up here that provides you information about what everything means, how many you have, and then it also provides you all of our development standards. So we just took snips directly from Land Development Code, you guys should all be familiar with this, and it tells you your setbacks. It also goes through your parking requirements, that's gonna be outlined here, everyone's favorite, and information on off-siting. So, one big thing in the Heritage District that we've run into is height. So your max height is included in your HBC development standards is 55 feet. You can go an additional 5 feet for parapet screening, so technically 60, so keep that in mind when you're building. If you go above 60 feet, you're gonna have to ask for a deviation. So at the end of this, if you guys wanna go higher, we're gonna have each one of the groups present, you're gonna have to tell us why, same thing with setbacks, all of that. So only things you can deviate from, setbacks, height, and you can offsite that parking. I know I just went through a lot of info before I split up the teams, general clarifying questions. And it's a lot of fun once you get started. I know this sounds like a lot of instructions, but you'll have a good time.
Our council has done the exercise, our planning staff, our economic development staff, like we've all gone through it, so we're excited to see what you guys build.
City Commissioner Gage wants to know if there are prizes.
Oh, you're just gonna try.
Just the honor of knowing the
Yeah, come on my team if you wanna win.
And is there a winner and a loser?
We're all here to have a good time. If you guys do decide to do your development standards and height and all those things, keep that in mind, explain to us why you're doing that. So you're the planning commission, you're the redevelopment commission, planning commission's who sees this, but why do you need more height? Is it so you can have more open space? Is it so that you can be closer to a setback line? You need to tell us why the town would provide a deviation and how it would benefit the community.
1,000 feet of retail, commercial?
Mm-hmm.
What are the dimensions of that 1,000 square feet?
Oh.
It's a block.
It's a block. I knew probably the first time I built this exercise, but I have no idea. They're to scale for each one, so I don't know what it is. It's just 1,000 square feet.
You need 15 of them.
You need 15.
And there are
But is it 20 by 50?
provided,
Are we developing unleasable space here? Like,
Yeah, what's
it's a concern of mine.
I love it. Exactly. All right, well,
Take advantage.
I'm gonna read off the teams. Okay, so table A is gonna be the 8-acre site over here. We have Dan Henderson, Veronica Gonzalez, Councilmember Torgerson, TJ Clausen, who's gonna talk to you about retail viability, Jan Simon, Leslie Davis, and Louis D. Gravina, I'm so sorry, but I'll have you over here on table A, okay?
What our trends are that are coming in from a pipeline perspective.
And then we have parcel B, so this is the Vaughn Avenue parcels adjacent to the university building. We have Ava Kutro, Kyle Maris, Councilmember Anderson, Casey Kendall, Adam Baugh, Adam's not here, Anthony's not here, Brian Anderson, and Lisa Gain.
can we grab one of our students to, all right.
All right, and for table C, we have Ashley McDonald, Amanda Elliott, Cassandra Updike, Bo Bigelow, Noah Munn.
We have 2 people absent on my team.
Oh, I don't want Keith.
Keith is not on the team.
And please use your planners when you staff, if you have questions.
Okay.
You guys are doing great.
Now, we had to bring in the culture now. So we have Anna, who is our ASU graduate. And we have Sandra, who is planner too. Now, I haven't done this exercise, so I just float around the back.
So just to orient you guys, this is the university building, Ash Street Garage, and it's like the big.
Oh, you did at council, okay.
Like right adjacent to Collab and Hale, and then this was like.
And you might want to do that now.
Yeah.
Who's gonna, of the three of you, we're not gonna make our plans. So of the three of you, who's gonna be? Brian, Brian, let's point it to you, you're our spokesman.
This already
So
has
you'll have that, sell your project, and take what deviations you're asking for. And these are our actual site in the Heritage District. It is oh, I'm sorry, you will also be the spokesperson, I forgot you were on our team. And you've done it as well, okay, so we won't change.
I vote for no open space because, wait, are we not?
You're developers, no, you're developers.
Minimal open space.
This will be a street. So I assume that's gonna run behind.
That's
We have a.
It's just, it's a rooftop.
well, you guys should find one solution that we can think, start with that, you're gonna run out of time, and then add in commercial.
You wanna start with commercial?
Do you have to use all these? And you have to use all these. That's all your parking.
And go max height.
all the parking for
My kids get stuck, I'm like,
All right.
Yeah.
I get that. I'm trying to prioritize myself.
so I think my husband's around for parking.
Right, like, is there like?
All right, so what are you starting with? Commercial, rent that, walk down lightly because it's.
And grass there.
Blue is our most lasting thing.
You want to face them to the Western Power Line track.
This could be.
That's right.
As a student, that's so.
No. And rents are gonna be high.
I think it's harder when you're like an architect, you're thinking about it, yeah.
Oh, yeah, maybe I should.
Do you want to play?
No, you should play it, you also, you have the most valuable information, but I think you're gonna be better. Well, you're gonna have to have a landscape.
Got it, yeah.
So started on their commercial. All right, we brought Clint here. Clint, because you're doing. Clint, they're ignoring the road structure, they're doing that last. Brian was asking about that.
When Clint enters the room, I go.
Oh, this is fun.
Oh, here comes traffic.
Here comes traffic.
Ruin all.
Clint, did you?
24 feet.
Yeah,
one is 20 feet.
Those have to be on the ground level. Can't be too, yeah, commercial can't be too. You can make it 2 levels, so if you wanna do your commercial 2 levels, you can do it. 55 feet, technically 6, 15 each for those ones. Your residential's a little smaller though, your residential's 12.
No, that's cool. This is literally what they're building. This is literally what they're building for.
Yes, you can.
On the Legos, it's gone. It's very, it's not gonna slow down, but, yeah.
It was a joke. We really play for us all, get really good college.
Traffic is too, there we go, forgot the wall of set. I know, well, how far is the roadway system doing that lane about?
Are we too close? Don't add that in. You only have to worry about fire access, don't worry about intersecting.
Drive aisles are not required. I told you.
But you can also think about it, you know, how would they, maybe the, I guess.
So where would you like to put this?
In the red retail, right? Parking.
Right, so I think
I'll make sure they get me.
So we're at 15 units, and then maybe 12.
Was this thing seems like you had to do that council? So what were the wins?
So we're gonna,
Okay.
where's our pinch builder?
We need to put a bunch of blues together and see how many blues we have. I mean, we don't, otherwise it's not.
That's 27 from
Without getting variance.
That's for deviation.
I mean, everyone's got the same
Well,
pieces as us, so
Ryan,
this
if
one's
our sales
technically
person
not meant to be possible without variance.
Like residential.
Yeah, for sure.
Higher the better.
Wait, we can still go one more.
You guys
Yeah, we can go one more.
I
Oh, yeah,
feel like
only went one on the-
Now,
Just because you can't have a ground for retail here, doesn't mean you can't have a ground for residential. Residential can't be on ground floor. Other areas follows. You have to think about it. Okay, I love it.
You have to park all of that.
because I've done this exercise now.
So we're gonna have parking structure.
Can I use all those blues?
Yep, and all that gray, that's why I said you guys gotta start doing lots of.
See if it's all.
Whatever.
I'm not plus one. We're offsite parking, then we do like entrance.
For sure.
Otherwise it's not.
That's what you're doing.
They want straight.
Who chose to set it up?
Oh, that's why.
It also prevents like a lot of like one short.
Sandra, I don't know if you know Brian's back, so. Wrapping.
How in the world?
Like, I'm offsite for, but they can offsite for residential, not for residential. I don't know why residential, do they have to have this?
So how many prisons do you have?
Okay.
Do you want me to get?
All right, Brian, you
Again,
better
all the
go
way
in
there.
there, you're our developer.
No, we're not.
This side.
One block still only four stacks.
Now, go over there and use management.
One is four, you stack it, and now we're all.
Maximum or three.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I should have said that, I'll make that apparent. So, yeah, because, in the Heritage District. Yeah, because I forgot, yeah, Heritage District has the story restrictions too.
But trust me, that is, there's actually parking, big podium.
Oh, so we're taking a drive aisle under park anywhere on the ground in the Heritage District?
One half a level improvement.
So just so I one of the chief brought up, that I can go over the instructions, is that there is a story restriction in the Heritage District in addition to the height restriction. So even if you're within the height requirements, if you're over 4 stories, you still have to ask for a deviation. So keep that in mind.
Some variation has to take place.
So.
Oh, and you think you're gonna get away with
This
that?
is not gonna work. No.
Like, where's all that parking going, guys?
This is just the collaborative process, right, where, yeah.
Technically, we could just fill
The residential off-site.
Let's see how many parking spots we can get if we go.
Do we wanna put another row in?
Oh, yeah.
Right up against. What's one square? Is that our 5-foot walk?
I will give you guys a hint for this side, is that you will not be able to park both the residential and commercial.
Does the box, does the door drop out here?
With the
Sidewalk access.
Do I think it's at 3 stories or 50?
Oh, like a tunnel.
Just do the 3 stories right now.
Like an arcade.
Yeah, let's do an arcade, that'd be fun.
That was.
Right, like the arcade where you know, when it's covered walkway.
Yeah.
What that would
That's what
entail.
it's called.
Right? An arcade is a covered walkway.
Level of I'm trying to work in Gilbert, got about.
I'm like, now I have to look that up, Kendra. You can, if you want to apply for an encroachment permit.
You're right.
Yeah.
So,
There's something.
48, combined 60.
No.
Good with the deviation on story.
I think we're
Don't
gonna.
make up these
that
in your head.
put that in my self-evaluation.
If you guys have justification, then it's like, it's easy to justify. Well, it's because I trust you guys.
Like a minute.
Do we charge it? She's yelling down. They got it, they could cash it, it's not us.
Look at the hype we've developed since you've been gone.
Oh my
Look
gosh.
at that.
Are they? By the time we're playing to have her on with the car,
Think
we're
about
just.
some of the
I
projects.
don't know, South Park,
Wait, you need 2 points of access? Or you got cheating, are you telling them things? No?
I was there.
This is what you do, right?
Yeah, sure. Amanda, how come you're not helping?
I'm just keeping the price down.
What are you on our team then?
You were observers,
You don't know the economics. I don't think it's actually gonna be.
Because there is a leveling approach. One of these is.
There we go. I got this.
Yeah, that is, yeah.
Get up in the car.
Well, do they have any roads there yet?
I mean, if you were to ask me what I would do here, honestly, if you're parking on, because we
Because
can't.
I'm gonna like it fighting later and I wanna see it from the ends. I'm saying residential.
Yeah.
Like that park.
Fire power.
It's a
You
studio,
know, like,
it's
my
a studio.
step back
You were just
at
told you
different
can't
levels,
break
like,
apart the
to
building.
You're saying 60 feet.
I'd have to go to the park. I think we do sort of, I don't know.
One less.
But only.
Eight less spots.
We might in this. Here, I got yours. Can you build? Can you build over the driveway one more? Technically, you would tunnel under it.
And actually, are you really doing?
Well, that was okay.
I guess too.
Entrance, you don't need to be inside. Like, they wouldn't need to be inside because they could build.
I know in the real world, that's fine.
They're underneath here.
I would say just lift that up and pull that green underneath.
Can I take this? If we could do just a straight.
I don't think it's any of the ones that we. They can break the wall, you're able to lift up from the other
That's my contribution. Here's
We haven't done that yet, we don't, they've only come to us through. They're all undergrounding your parking. It's too expensive, it's not as a pro forma.
Yes.
Oh, you got it? Okay, so you don't need to show this all the way through.
Yeah, just show where it's. I'm just showing. So you can have it even hang off the side.
Real quick, we do need 2 points of access.
And then we can
options
push it
like
back.
this.
Yep, just like that. There you go.
Do we want to put that?
No, that's good. That's as far as it goes.
Add another point of access. Oh, but wait.
I'm only saying this is our summary.
Yeah, good.
For the resident.
Okay, so then I'll follow what you just. You're putting it
Twelve and one.
in the wrong spot.
Not inside the parking garage. So there's some establishments like the area of Scottsdale. They have
Oh, good
a
idea.
wraparound, but they also have the garage here, and then they have an amenity center
Got it.
separate of it, the pool.
Different market, I'm just saying.
Wait, how do you feel
This one.
It was literally across the street from the office.
Yeah, no, you're right, I'm just.
Right.
Right.
Just so you know where we're at, 'cause I think it's gonna be slightly in. Did you see green over here?
Green, hey, we got selling green.
Good, good.
Yeah, but these little skinny ones, because they're.
Yeah.
Or we can stay. What do you guys want to do? Want to go to the corner? Do you want to do a little breakaway in the middle?
Like it's right, it's like, what is it called?
Design.
Yeah, that's how I'm getting a headache now.
Okay, so what's the two little? Already putting these things. It seems like wasted money.
Yeah, we can
get another 5.
Hey, no cheating, go away.
Well, they're doing well. I mean,
How many for these ones for residents?
It's not gonna get delays. Put them over there. No, I'm not.
Are we allowed to separate this block?
Yeah.
Okay.
But still, that doesn't make sense because once this is lined up, it's not still later.
We meant to have a developer of Oxford, and there's always a location in there, and that's the one that has like the like landscaping and everything.
Yeah, 200 spaces, 50 blocks.
Because it's so ridiculous.
I'm saying we have to do it because this can't be.
Your expense, even though you only have.
Oh, I see what you're asking. Yeah, start taking them out.
These are
Okay. Rooftop bar.
No, they do.
It's always turning. It's like that's like the same thing with I'm like, oh,
Obviously don't know how this works on private.
Not
Mr. Gilbert.
No. Oh, wait, this could be.
Those ones are hard, those are with the two you got.
What above ground parking?
Yeah.
They were doing all of that. Yeah. I might get your
Actually, I took a picture of it.
Oh, this one right there to.
Double decker screens is on top of the opposite.
Why not?
I know. All right, team, I'm gonna give you a 5-minute warning. If everyone feels very lovely, we can make it 7 minutes. Are we going to 5 minutes? Don't say anything, we'll 5. All right, 5-minute warning.
Hit a whole interior parking garage, just like.
Gap and access.
What's that place in Scottsdale that we likes?
What's the place? I can't think.
Is it multifamily or residential?
Yeah, it's multifamily. I don't like the name of it. Optima, yeah.
Yeah, they have, another one of their products where they had it all they have it wrapped now.
She works for me.
I wish I could read
The 5 is the variance.
If anybody ever came to me saying we want to add. Never once has anybody said, you know, I'm really thinking about it.
We're gonna pretend.
Oh, me?
We don't have a choice.
Oh, I didn't see anything, okay, I didn't see anything.
So then you need.
They have more.
Floors.
We don't have a choice, yes, we do.
So it's just like a little cave, a tomb.
What do you have? Like
A tomb of the unknown. You'll throw
put on Lego acrylics?
Just throw that ass.
We need to get that guy. Yeah, that one's going. Alright. Check that.
Well, I think this whole table's cheating, because you guys have the planning staff building your whole.
I have a very anxiety. I'm not
They are.
Is this okay?
What
Yeah. Okay, how's fire turning around?
Like maybe the density's.
Want me to
So you guys are offsetting it?
I'll bring you over.
Oh, it's in your pocket?
Good green space all the time.
Where I was gonna say, it doesn't have to be ground level.
Green space that entire roof. This is just alternating the roof line. That's what.
Yeah, we could. This we're probably not getting.
Oh, yeah, look
We already get.
That would be good.
I have a little layer, you guys can get more green, but you guys want more.
But then we have the green
I'll go there. I can get it.
Excuse me, I brought traffic engineering over. Perhaps you should have consulted his colleagues on the project. You might have this.
Well, we wouldn't have had to be accurate, because he'd say that many years on the road that hadn't even completed.
Come on, you're used to traffic engineering meetings.
This is starting to look like being
It's your road.
it's
It's in here.
We were told we
There's
could
one
go
way.
underneath.
Yeah.
Did you get a scale fire truck and see if you
Oh,
could get
yeah.
around
There is a
there?
hammerhead.
Well, that's the thing about this project too, is like, think about how difficult that is. They're not asking us to.
Honestly, I really think that you guys pulled this.
Try to get to your-
Then the fire hazard.
You know? What's this?
Going away. You don't need it on traffic.
I'm gonna go around and start.
This is a walking street, it's kind of a new age.
I'll go
This is like the field of dreams.
You look like you're in
I have to make sure people don't cheat on height. Yeah, I will just check that to verify. Plus, 15 is, so you guys are up.
It's before they trimmed it.
Well, then you start demolishing stuff.
In the whole street.
I feel like that's the first time they gave him some shears.
And there's some world out there. You already made 2 students cry, I think.
I have
So,
and then urban plan with and the trainer made Kyle.
All right, everyone, wrap it up, time's up, so you're fine, are you ready? And within your group, make sure to check what your height is, figure out what your height is, so how many feet tall it is at your tallest point, and how many stories you have. And then also, if you have any deviations, this is when you're gonna explain to the group your development and how tall you went, and if you're going with any deviation. So I'll give you about 2 minutes to wrap up and talk amongst yourselves, and then we're gonna call in each group to present.
is this,
Yeah, so what can I have here?
This looks like when I tell my kids.
Sal wants to know how much we're.
They watch YouTube, they like to see these guys do these things.
Oh my God, what just happened?
50.
Lisa, what happened here?
I don't know.
The variance on that.
Heritage District has the one about to activate the pedestrian.
Oh, yeah, now we gotta write an addendum to staff report, you guys are gonna have to condition this last minute. Really?
Oh, sure. Yeah, this nice little white space.
Okay, so we'll have Isaac do that.
Beautiful. Yeah. Just saying.
Yeah, I know. I had
telling them how you, that trainer made me cry during the urban plan training.
Because I said, well, Kyle, she goes, she already made the trainer made Kyle cry.
It was an 8-hour training and she picked on him.
And it's like, really?
I did make, I
No, she did make 2 students cry.
You had.
Did I tear up?
He said
It was intense.
He told me it was intense. He told me the air was bad.
I was sitting right next to him. He told me it was dust. I was like,
That's a
here's.
fun fact, just so you know.
You're like, wow.
She's old too. Sophie Lambert.
Yeah, so they didn't build as high as they could have. For CAE, so.
I hope they're not exposed. Sal will be right on when there's a ladder.
A couple of years ago, these guys came
I
in
did
planning
facilitation last time.
height variance.
And Shannon's like, Lisa, you're doing
The guy over here was not.
today. And I was like, change that. And I was like, listen up. And they're like, what?
And then shortly after that, then we approved the handwritten note.
Oh.
Coming to the lab.
Oh, nice.
Built it taller than what they were asking for, but it was a town.
I love her.
Kind of an interesting.
Those kids are really lucky.
Perception.
To have her as a teacher.
I think
Sydney, what timing are Are we 1 minute warning?
This is now.
I think actually 76.
Is there a team that wants to present first?
Are you presenting first?
It's really confident.
All right, everyone. We're gonna get started here.
Yeah, now she's at Corona.
Very different, very different.
You'll be our Vanna? Okay.
Even though I'm 16 years old, I'm like.
All right, we're gonna get started.
That's what I have to do with
Hands down.
Walk away from the project.
Walk away. All right. Okay, we're gonna start over there with is that group B over there?
Yeah, group B.
Okay.
I say he's a gauge customer.
Group winner? Yeah, group winner. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, who wants to present on your item?
Brian.
I was volunteered to present this art project. So in our project, what we went with is a wrap project. We went with commercial on the bottom, on this corner here, because this corner would have the most visibility down Vaughn Ave, basically Gilbert Road, where most our foot traffic would be, and auto traffic. So if you're on Gilbert Road, you're looking down, you're coming off of Bostino's or whatever the bars are down here, you look down and you get this glimpse of this building here with the commercial. So drops the eyesight down. We have the commercial down on the bottom here, mixed use building, another second floor commercial up here, and then all the blue is what we did for residential. So it's your traditional wrap project, mixed use wrap project. And in the middle, that's where we did our parking garage for the wrap project. And then everything that we had outside of that is going to be our green space, where you'll have your amenity areas, your pool area, dog park, and pool.
What was that? We're building this in Boston.
And then for our points of access onto the site, we're coming off of, I don't know if this street has a name, it doesn't, but there's a road on this side.
Anderson Ave.
Anderson Ave.
Very
They would
good.
come into, on the back corner, into the site, leads into the parking garage. And then it wraps around the site for our fire access, and then another entry point on the west side of the building to enter the parking garage on this corner. Our height is under what's allowed, we're 51 feet. Inside of all of our setbacks, no deviations that we came across that we requested. We feel like the project is in compliance with all zoning codes.
And traffic engineering was looked it over?
Yeah, he gave it 2 thumbs up.
2 thumbs up.
And you guys decided to use your open space, did you use all of it?
Yeah, it was everything except for
Except for the roads, and you didn't off-site any of your parking? No AUP for off-siting?
But they do have residential on ground level.
Okay, yeah, that's something that I didn't say in here, so this would be in compliance with the code, except for residential at ground level. I didn't go over that, it's in the instructions, but in the Heritage District, you need a conditional use permit, so it's not allowed by right. So this would be in compliance.
I vote yes.
Except for for that. Great job, guys. We want to start over here with table C.
We decided that no matter how you judge it, we're all gonna move into it together.
A lot of camaraderie from Group C.
Yeah, ours is an effort in maximizing your buildable area, because that's what we had to do. So we're completely maxed out. We have our 2 entrances that essentially are linear, divide our lot in half, all the way from Page to Vaughn. All of our traffic engineering concerns, our hammerhead, it's all under here.
Go. Yeah, verify.
Yeah. You can, look through, like we have our road going through. We are aware that you can't have ground floor residential, so we didn't seek that variance, but we are gonna need approval to build a little bit higher for our parking garage. So we do have mixed use, some live work here, right? We've got commercial on the ground floor, all residential. Once you've hit that commercial podium. we've got our parking garages inside the core with a lot of green space on the lower floors. But for about 50% of our garage space, we are going to seek approval to go up to 60 feet. We are also needing, and that's for the residential parking, we're also needing to seek approval to use some of the common parking with that agreement. So here's all of our off-site parking, right over here. Yep,
72 spots.
72 spots.
So you guys went 5 stories with the parking, so that's what got you over? And then
Correct.
you fit your mixed-use development, the retail and the residential?
We fit that in under our 55 foot.
Do you have a dog park?
You can take your dog to the roof.
I didn't think I was gonna put bowling in the rules.
Yeah, we did fit in some green space, but it's all above grade, essentially.
Right. So you guys got about half your green space in there and rooftop?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so then just, you're requesting then just a deviation for the 5 stories, and so what would be the justification for that one?
Not possible.
We have maxed out your slot, so this is an opportunity to see how many occupants you can put on 1.6 acres. We're giving it to you here, but you're gonna have to help us park it.
All right, let's give a round of applause. Great job. The final group, Group C, who's presenting for you guys. Oh.
We didn't come up with this. We can. Well, we have a prime location, and we've actually left extra space because we heard Adam Baugh really wanted to bring in a lot of rats. No, I'm just kidding. So, we actually have Elliott and Gilbert Road in the southeast corner. We actually did a statement piece on the corner going full elevation, and then we tiered it back with full drive aisles at 48 feet. We've got a full access on Elliott, we've got a full access on Gilbert, and a right in, right out on Elliott, double access into a parking garage in the middle. We are gonna have to ask for deviations on the residential to a ground floor to wrap the parking garage.
We also did a rooftop gardens with balconies and access underneath some of this to get into the development. This is gonna be phase 2.
I don't remember that.
And then, is you guys have this one, or are you asking for a request?
I think somebody dropped that in our.
No, yours.
Someone cheated?
I think it fell on the floor.
Yeah. Ava was around here, so.
Wow.
All right. Awesome. So you're just asking for the deviation, so you just need the conditional use permit for the ground floor residential, and besides that, no deviations?
Correct.
And you use almost all your open space?
That's just about all of it. When we have a lot of extra open space.
Perfect.
We'd like to request that another 600 units.
Another 600, you see one more density.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Awesome. All right, well, round of applause. Thank you, everyone. So we're gonna move right into the next presentation, and we're gonna have Urban 3 kind of talk about why this is all really important. Do you mind helping me just put these out of the way?
I'm sorry.
I was gonna move them back, but we could just leave them here. Stare at it, that's fine.
I think we would.
I just thought of Tony's argument.
Great, well, I hope that exercise just gives you a little more insight on the competing priorities and the trade-offs that are necessary to make a project pencil. I think we all realize that when applications come before us, but this just is an opportunity to really apply those. And as Gilbert continues to grow and reach build out and subsequently redevelop, it's important that the decisions we make on Gilbert projects really consider the financial picture and economic impact, that those decisions have on Gilbert's future. So some of the questions that we were thinking about are, what questions do we need to be asking, of our projects to improve the built environment while also providing for a sustainable economic future?
and how can data visualizations help aid in making decisions related to projects. So with that, I would like to introduce Heather Worthington. Heather is a principal at Urban 3. She brings 25 years of leadership experience in local government organizations, most recently as the Director of Long Range Planning in Minneapolis, where her team led the creation, engagement, and policy adoption of the Minneapolis 2040 Comprehensive Plan. She was the first Deputy County Manager appointed in Ramsey County, Minnesota, where she led the Economic Growth and Community Investment Service team and led the restructuring of the county into service teams. As adjunct faculty at Hamlin University School of Business, she teaches in the Center for Public Administration and Leadership program, as well as the Masters in Public Administration program. Heather is past president of the Minnesota City County Management Association and was one of the first ICMA, International City County Management Association's credentialed city managers in the state of Minnesota. So with that, we'll have Heather come on up here and chat with us.
I am going to use a microphone because my opera voice is a little worn out. So good evening, everybody. Thanks for having us come tonight and present on our product, which we did for Gilbert about a year ago. Joe Manicosi, our founder, was out here, I think it was last August. Yep. You keep saying fall, and I'm thinking like August is not fall, but okay, I get it. It starts to cool off here, right? And Urban 3 is a company that does something we call geo-accounting. So this is basically a mashup between finance and map visualization. And what we're trying to do is take government practices, government information and data, and demystify it. So that's a little bit about Urban 3. We're based in Asheville, North Carolina, which is green and lovely this time of year and very mountainous. And we are residents of Buncombe County, which is a large county that includes the Biltmore Estate, which you might have visited if you've been to North Carolina. So I'm going to start in a pretty basic way by talking about what is it when we talk about value per acre? What does that mean? And the analogy I'm going to use is this one. How do we compare cars? So here's, 5 different cars I can count. And that Ford F-150 on the far right, big gas tank, big powerful vehicle. If we were measuring it by miles per tank, that Lariat wins every time, right? It's got a massive tank on it. It can go 648 miles on one tank of gas. Did you know that? I bet a bunch of you have Lariats. But that's not really how we measure cars, right? We measure cars by miles per gallon. And in this case, the Isetta wins every time, hands down. Even back in the 1950s when the Isetta was built by BMW right after World War II, it was getting 50 to 70 miles per gallon. Now, arguably, you probably don't want to ride around in that thing. It's a bit of a death trap. But you can see here, what we're really talking about is comparing these different vehicles across the sort of apples to apples, miles per gallon, not miles per tank, okay? That kind of sets us up to have this conversation about what does a value per acre mean when we think about property. So we call this our economic MRI. Again, this is Buncombe County, the home of Urban 3. The big purple blob you see in the middle there is the Biltmore Estate. That was built in the late 1800s by the Vanderbilt family and represents a significant amount of property tax value in the county. But if you take that out and you're looking at just sort of the surrounding area, you can see that our property tax value per acre is not particularly robust throughout the entire county. Asheville is a big purple spike. The purple spike is not an indication of the height of the buildings. It's an indication of the potency of their value per acre. So that's kind of foundational to the work we do. We're trying to compare apples to apples to see what types of land use are most potent when it comes to providing your community with revenue to provide the services that you want to provide. Okay, so we're going to get into tax systems a little bit. This is just kind of foundational and just level setting this conversation. So this is all 50 states in the District of Columbia and how they use tax revenue and the sources that that revenue comes from. You can see like over on the far left, most of those states, right up to about North Carolina, heavily dependent on property tax. This is pretty typical throughout the United States. More enlightened states have begun to diversify their revenue picture. And Arizona has a significant amount of what you call, you call this, we would call it a sales tax, you call it sales privilege here, okay? And you can see that when we go to Arizona, that's your breakdown of revenue sources. Really quick overview of how your taxes work. So you have a limited cash value for that piece of property, and you will apply an assessment ratio and reach an assessed value, which you multiply by your tax rate to achieve your tax bill. So we're just gonna walk through that calculation. So these are two properties, one commercial, one residential, both full cash value. You can only increase that 5% year over year. My state where I live in Minnesota is 8% year over year. So that's a hard cap you have here in Arizona, 5% increase year over year. So you can see that if you try to apply a 10% value increase to that property, that's not gonna work, you hit the cap. But the way you make up for this with commercial property and residential property, and by the way, this is very typical throughout the US, most cities and counties in the United States tax their commercial property at a higher rate than the residential property. But in Arizona, last year, your state legislature passed a bill, Senate Bill 1093, which will lower the commercial assessment rate to 15% in 2027. So you will lose some revenue on your commercial property there. You can see that the limited cash value of that property, each of them was worth $300,000. The commercial is 18, residential is 10. You apply that rate, and then you get the tax bill for each property each year. So that's how your taxes work. This is where they go. How many of you knew that most of it, 56 cents out of each dollar went to your school district? Yeah, must have a couple of school board members here. Maricopa County gets a chunk. Community college system gets a chunk. City gets pretty little, actually. 9 cents of every dollar goes to the town of Gilbert. So your sales privilege is a major part of how you raise revenue for this community to provide services to your residents. And this is what we call a butterfly chart. What we're showing you here is on the left your revenue, your income, and on the right your expenditures, and sort of how those filter out through each fund. So what we did here was just looked at your annual comprehensive financial report, which is something every city in the US does. And we just want to visualize this in a way that you can start to see how much that sales privilege is supporting, stop hitting that now, supporting your public safety, general government services. And it's pretty significant. Because you look down the list at other revenue sources, which are much less, and how they're supporting, using most of your property tax to support debt service, and some parks, no parks in there actually, that's all system development fees. So this is kind of how your revenue picture lays out. So now we want to jump into total taxable value for Maricopa County. So the data set that we got for Gilbert was produced by the county, and we actually analyzed the entire county. So we also picked up Tempe, Mesa, Phoenix, but we're going to focus on Gilbert tonight, obviously. And what you're looking at here is your taxable value per acre. You can see that light green is fairly dominant within this metroplex around Phoenix. But when you look at the model sort of in a two-dimensional vertical sense, you're starting to see that there are some very potent areas within the metroplex that support a lot of property tax in particular, or sales tax value per acre. And you can see downtown Phoenix has some really high spikes. So those, again, are not tall buildings per se. They're just buildings and property uses that generate a lot of tax revenue for the city of Phoenix. The same applies to Gilbert. So we're going to isolate Gilbert out here. Tempe's right up on the edge there. This is Gilbert primarily kind of flowing into Mesa, Chandler, and Tempe. But you can see that Gilbert is kind of what we call kind of a shag carpet. It's relatively low in terms of the value per acre. And when we isolate it out, you can see it's almost, the vast majority of it is green, so that's kind of low value uses. okay? But here we're gonna turn it on its side again and look at those pixie sticks, as we like to call them. And you can see that you've got these 5 areas of the city that are really potent. The uses there are really driving a very high revenue source for sales tax and for property tax. When you turn those off and you just isolate the Heritage District, you can start to see how productive the Heritage District is, even though it's not fully redeveloped yet. You still have a lot of land there to put into use, as you just did in your Lego exercise, which is a great way to visualize that. So taxable property, you have about 64% of your land area taxable and about 36% non-taxable. That's a significant number for a city that's not a capital city or a city without large institutional property owners like colleges or churches. And a big chunk of that is actually owned by the city, by the town of Gilbert for redevelopment purposes in the Heritage District. And we're going to jump into that a little bit. And again, here you can see just another visualization of your balance between non-taxable and taxable. This is the Heritage District, 48% of it, almost half, is non-taxable today. Of course, you have plans to change that in the near future. So that's something we can dig into a little bit tonight. Your value productivity in the city is relatively low, and we're just going to talk about taxable area and taxable value. So these are the 2 metrics we like to use to help you understand how productive your land is. This is really just like farming. You think about the crops that you're going to plant year to year or season to season in your case, because you have a growing season that's much longer. And you think about what that return on investment will be for you when you plant that crop. Right now, your ratio of taxable area to value is 1-to-1. And that is about as low as we see in the United States. But you have a really important opportunity with the Heritage District to start bumping this number up. You can see that it's just starting to edge upward here. And this is after the completion of the collab last year. Okay. And you're really starting to approach 1-to-2, which is excellent. So I want to talk a little bit about what this looks like at grade. When you're walking around in your city, what does this look like? What does productive land use look like? So this is your Walmart. And that runs you about just slightly under $900,000 an acre. Now Walmart is a large land user. They typically have 10 to 14 acre parcels. Their parking is the majority of the space that they take. So this isn't surprising, but again, we just want to look at that. Your residential, pretty typical suburban section here where you've got curvilinear roads, you've got houses that are probably have about an 8 to 10 foot setback, or side setback, excuse me. And you've got, maybe we were kind of guessing earlier today, you might be at like 6 units per acre in this typology. This is generating, again, about the same as the Walmart, okay? But when you get into your value per acre calculation on things like these garden apartments on the left or the 3-story lofts on the right, you start to see that number edge up. So it's about 1.8 million on the garden apartments, about 3.2 million per acre on that 3-story, and then we just go up from there. So this is the Stara, the 3-story large-scale apartments, 4.8, 4-story apartments, 6.3, averaging out around 2 million an acre for these types of developments. This is really what we're talking about. This typology is this missing middle, right? So you think about anything that's shared wall, multifamily, could be as small as a duplex, could be a live-work unit with mixed use on the main level, just what you've created here with your Legos, and anything in between. And you have a lot of that here. You have some really nice townhomes. You have, in this vignette, you can see the townhomes here. You can see a little denser townhomes, some mixed use, your Whole Foods, which is killing it at 49.8 million per acre. Largely, the Whole Foods does this because of your sales privilege, right? Because you tax food, and there's a well-established retail user in that ground floor. So this property does particularly well here. This property in Minnesota, by the way, we have one that looks almost identical to it in Minneapolis, probably doesn't do better than about 25 million an acre, because we do not tax food, and we do not have local option sales tax. So, all things being equal, you're doing really well there. I want to talk a little bit about commercial and then office. So your Home Depot, again, very similar to your Walmart, just a little bit better than Walmart, not a lot better. Super Target, not a lot better, but about the same. These are all kind of in the ballpark. Northrop Grumman, about 1.1 million per acre. Now this is manufacturing, so you have sort of a built-in workforce here. They have to come to work to build something. That's a little different than Deloitte, where people probably are working from home. So, you know, standing here today in front of you, if I had a crystal ball and could tell you what would happen with those properties in the future, you know, you'd like that a lot. I can't do that. But I can guess that Deloitte is way overparked, given its current workforce and when they actually come to work. Alta, Copper Point Shopping Center, 2.1, 2.3. Again, compared to the Walmart down here on the left, you can see Copper Point is parked at a level that is reasonable. As I was telling your staff earlier today, those spaces probably turn every 10 to 20 minutes. That's pretty typical for a shopping center like this. So I think that these are performing pretty well at 2.1, 2.3 million per acre. These sites could be used a little bit more intensively, but they're doing fine. But this is where things start to get really interesting. We're now in the Heritage District, the Mercantile Building, no off-street parking, none, not one space. And it pulls 6.8 million per acre. Your historic buildings, your heritage buildings are almost always going to pull a very high value per acre. And so it's not a preservation play, it's an economics play for you to keep those, right? They're interesting, they generate a lot of traffic, they have deep interest in the retail market. People like to visit because it's interesting. People like history, even though they didn't like it in high school, right? So really quick on land use valuation. So we didn't do this analysis for Gilbert, but we did it recently for a suburb of Indianapolis, Marion, Indiana. So it's kind of similar in terms of this metroplex idea, right? So Phoenix, Indy, kind of similar. And we were looking at, you know, what is the number of square feet of building, parking, and roads per person in the community. And so this is how Marion broke down, but this is how they're taxing it. And I think this represents maybe the biggest opportunity in American cities is to think differently about how you are taxing parking. Not just from the standpoint of managing incentives around that parking, but also providing yourself with more revenue for land uses that are really undertaxed and in many cases underutilized. So I think it's something for you to consider when you think about parking, whether you're building it as a public asset or you're requiring it through your regulatory process. So we're going to dive into the Heritage District a little bit. So this is, you know, this space. You probably visit there frequently. These are some of the heavy hitters in the Heritage District. So all the way up to 12.8 million per acre. That's a relatively small building. I drove by it today and I was like, oh, that's not very big. That's pretty amazing. The Collab, which just came online last year, 15.3 million per acre. It's 4 stories, not higher than the Gilbert Water Tower. I did say, kind of tongue-in-cheek, but not really, that if y'all wanted to do something interesting with the water tower, you should place it on top of a building so that people can actually see it even better. And that might help you with your height issue, but what a guy could do, right? Value per acre on this Tempe project is 11.9 million, 30.7 million, and then 47.8 million. Relatively low slung. This is not a super tall building, 9 stories at its highest or this lowest. Kind of a nice infill development. And admittedly, Tempe is definitely moving in this direction, right? I understand that you're not there yet, but that's just an interesting comparison for a neighbor. So this, we like to call this our Brady Bunch slide, but basically this is what you're looking at. When you think about your typologies, residential and then mixed use, high density, medium density, low density, you don't have to do a lot of high density development, you just have to do some. Think of it as balancing your scorecard, right? When you think of how you're generating revenue throughout the city and where you have opportunities to do it that will be sort of easily digestible for the community, right? So you're not putting this in somebody's backyard. just diving in a little bit to sales privilege, again, it's at 59%, it's a big chunk of cash. And this is what it looks like, this is how it breaks down. So a bit of it is construction, the majority of it is retail and restaurant. Not surprising to you, right? I mean, that seems anecdotally true. We looked at it inside your employment areas and outside. We wanted to see, what does sales privilege look like in Central Northwest Heritage Banner and Gateway? And what we see happening there is the Central is your most potent area. 36 million, Gateway 6 million, Banner 3, 1 million in Heritage, but going up all the time, right? And then 12 million in the Northwest. So you're really taking good advantage of these areas. Again, when you think about playing to your strengths, I'd argue that this is where you double down, right? You get really serious about how you think about these spaces and their ability to help you generate revenue. This is what your sales tax privilege looks like in total numbers and per acre. So again, here just apples to apples, looking at these numbers per acre. So fairly potent. We also mapped commuting patterns because for a large metro area like the Phoenix sort of metroplex, you want to know where people are coming from and how they move through that space, because that's how they're going to make decisions about where to shop. And that impacts your sales privilege. Large corporations, of course, do turning movement studies. They track data on you as a consumer, right? You do some of the same things as a city to help you have an advantage in this conversation. So you have about 57,000 people coming into your city every day, and about that many people kind of going out towards Phoenix. And then we broke it down by your nearest neighbors, so you can kind of see where people come in from, where they leave. All of this speaks to something called retail leakage. How much retail leakage do you have? Well, that's a whole other study, but I would argue get the people to come here and keep them here, especially after work, right? So that's the key. Now, we didn't do your return on investment. Ooh, now it stopped working. Weird. Clicker stopped. We didn't do your return on investment calculation, but we did a couple of kind of quick and dirty analyses for you so that we could talk with some intelligence about your roadway system and how much your infrastructure is costing. So right now, you have this much roadway, 2-lane roadway. You can drive from Gilbert to Providence. It would be a really fun trip because you go through St. Louis. So we also looked at Springfield, Missouri. We finished this project a few months ago. Springfield is a capital city. It's a relatively large city. It has a lot of land, open area, and you can see that it's similarly situated with regard to the parking issue. So this would be another level of analysis that we would do. Where this came from, do you know what that is?
It's just the mirror of the slide.
Yeah, I don't know why it's there, it's weird. Huh, okay. Anyway, so this is just another way to look at area versus value calculation. It's just an example. But what we found with Springfield was Springfield had been trying to make this decision about annexation. So they were looking to the west, and they kept annexing unincorporated areas to the west of Springfield. And when they brought us in, we said, you really can't sustain that. That's a real challenge for you going forward. And we showed them this data in a visual fashion so they could understand that their area is really being dominated by land that's not very productive. They are probably overparked in a large number of areas in the city. And they need to get that black square bigger, right? They need to see more buildings there. When GFOA talks about assets, they're talking about things like this computer, this dais, these tables, right, your public works trucks. But they also say roads are an asset. And we admire our friends at GFOA, but we disagree with them. Roads are a massive liability for you. They are not an asset. Can you pick up your roads and sell them to Tempe or Mesa? It's not really an asset then, is it? But it is forever. Once you build it, you gotta maintain it. If you live in Minnesota, you gotta plow it. Luckily, you don't have to do that here. And so we want to know sort of what happens to a road over time. You build it, you have that initial investment, and you can use it for a long time, 30 to 50 years, depending on surface material, right? Depending on whether you have snow, you don't, lucky you. And then you're doing some maintenance on it right along, you're crack sealing it, you're seal coating it, you're restriping it, right? But then comes the day when you have to rebuild it. And that's the painful moment, because that's when the price goes way up. And I was telling your staff earlier today, early in my career when I was just a pup, I rebuilt an entire city's worth of roadways. And labor and material costs were expensive, but that was the early 2000s. Today, we're seeing typically, 50%, 70% increase in labor and materials for road construction. So roads are not cheap, and they get a lot of use and they get beat up and we have to fix them, and so I won't belabor the point, but you get it, right? So this is the cycle. Once it starts, 30 to 50 years from now, you do it again. You just never end, right? It's just a constant cycle. And you have to think about what that looks like in this space of these private roads, which have not been turned back to you yet. You don't own these yet. The developer still owns them. But you will get them eventually. They will become your liability eventually. And right now you have 2,600 lane miles of roads in Gilbert. Your annual cost, let me go back, I was too quick on the clicker. Your annual cost estimate is about $123 million for maintenance, capital, etc. So we go to your revenue picture. Your revenue is right now $62 million for these areas of debt service, development charges, your HERF, your annual revenue. And your outlay is around 68 million, excuse me. So you've got a gap already. And my clicker's on. The animation's cool until you click and nothing happens, right? So your life cycle costs on these roads are about 55 million. You're just not generating enough revenue to support the system already today. Now, by the way, don't feel bad about this, because I have yet to find an American city that is generating enough revenue to cover their costs for infrastructure. And some are much worse off than you are. But it is something that you need to keep in the front of your mind as you think about your biggest asset, which is your land, right? And how that land is helping you generate revenue.
But really, we weren't generating that much revenue until downtown Gilbert started to get regentrified, and then Santan Mall, everything along the 60, all that money was going to Mesa.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really going to be interesting to see what happens in the years coming now that we actually have people coming and circulating there.
Right. All right. So I think I've covered that adequately. Lest you become too depressed. So this is about where you stand today. About half your system's affordable, about half of it's unaffordable. Okay. So we wanted to map some different scenarios for you, because part of the challenge of doing this work, everything okay?
I was just gonna get you a second clicker, keep going.
Oh, yeah, okay. Part of the challenge of kind of envisioning where you should be headed with this is to know what's happening today, but if you made these incremental changes, what could happen tomorrow? So this is the magic of what I think you were doing tonight with the Lego exercise, really trying to be creative about this. Again, this is just your value per acre, isolating out Heritage District. So your existing tax revenue on Heritage is 3.8 million. And again, I don't know who made the decision to buy up these parcels and hold them for development, but I think that person should get a community award, because when you do that, you position yourself as a municipality to be in the driver's seat and controlling the outcome. And if you try to work with a developer to do that, it's invariably painful. So the way that you handled it was really smart, in my opinion. So here we are looking at Heritage. This is your area. The gray is non-taxable, the blue is taxable. The collab's right there by the water tower. And this is a under entitlement currently, is that right, South Anchor? No. Better? Yay, thank you. Thanks so much. So let's dig into this parcel right here, this is 325 Ash Street in the district. This is what became the collab. And you can see that before 2018, when we did your initial, we looked at initial data from 2018, and then we looked after 2022. So that's what it's generating currently. In a minute, I'm gonna get to all these, you'll see all these roll up in a minute. So that's in progress. We got this one. Current with Heritage Park, 145 million value. Relatively small input in terms of density, right? This is not like a hugely dense project. But it's gonna generate a lot of revenue for the city. About 163% increase. And as we look at the other projects in this district, South Anchor, which is moving along, again, right now, it's just an empty surface lot. As you can see, this is a project that's gonna generate 18 loft townhome units, a cafe with retail, live work, restaurant, retail, current with South Anchor, 57. Great project for you. About 121% increase for those parcels, value per acre, right? And then the last one is the Gilbert owned parcels that are additional to this, and you're working through those. That's just a huge inventory you've got to work through. Tough market right now. We hope it starts to shift a little bit. I can't count the number of market cycles I've been through in my career, but usually, 3 to 5 years, it kind of pivots, you go on to a new thing. So these are your vacant parcels currently. This is what you're pulling from these parcels currently. With your vacant parcels developed, we think you're gonna be in the range of 317 million. Now, we don't ascribe to the idea that you should be fanciful with your numbers. We're very conservative with our estimates, so you could do better. I'm sure you could do better. But about a 224% increase for that area. Yeah.
When you're saying a little over 300 million and there's a $61 million deficit, so you're saying, if I'm interpreting this correctly, you're saying that would balance the road deficit plus.
Just your road deficit, right.
But just those buildings will balance the road deficit.
Well, but is that value or is that taxable value?
Exactly.
Like, I mean, you're saying, are you generating 317 in revenue from taxes?
That's a value, and then I think this is taxes after.
Okay, because then it wouldn't net out the roads even.
Well, she's saying it will net out the roads, barely.
That was, well, not with the ongoing maintenance, I guess, is what I was saying.
7.8 million per year. Is what you'll get to in revenue.
Okay.
So again, and I don't, this is annoying, I don't know why this is here, but this says 1 to 5. So you've reached about 353% on those Gilbert owned parcels in terms of your total value and your tax revenue. So you're on your way to 11.7 million in additional revenue annually if you fully develop that heritage district.
I say we give it to him.
So, I skipped right over that. So what you can do, we like geo-accounting, we think it's a very powerful tool. I think it makes this conversation with constituents much easier. I think that generally people like to understand economics and like to understand how things work. And this is a great visualization of just that issue. And it's very relatable. They understand that house they live in, that's low density, residential, is not generating as much revenue for the city as the mixed use project on the lower right. It's an apples to apples comparison. Focus on your most productive areas. You've already done that tonight. You've delved into your newest redevelopment opportunity here. You're focusing on the Heritage District. That's terrific. As I said, double down, play to your strengths, right? So this is what it looks like for you right now. These areas are generating a lot of productivity for tax revenue purposes, primarily for your sales privilege, but it's also property tax. And you can think about this, if you think about this in a value per acre and you spread that across the city, you're always looking at that. So again, miles per gallon, not miles per tank, right? So think of your existing investments, you're gonna build roads, you're gonna rebuild roads, you're gonna maintain them, and think about how you're gonna fully utilize them, you're paying for it anyway. That is the skin in the game that you have as a municipality. And I also think, again, after doing this for many years professionally, I think we're probably undervaluing that infrastructure. If you don't build that road, they won't come. They won't build it themselves. There's definitely a but-for test here, right? But for your investment in that infrastructure, that development would not happen. So think about how you're pricing it. It's a very valuable input that you're making as a local government. And again, you're not penciling out on your roads right now. The other thing I'll just say about this though is, you also don't have to build more roads. You have lots of roads. So you can think about how to use the ones you have more effectively too. Not to put too fine a point on it. Consider your infill opportunities and gentle densities. So again, you don't have to build a 10-story or 20-story tower. You don't have to be Tempe. You just have to build a little bit of density, a little bit of a different typology to gain significant benefits. Look at the collab. Is that five stories? 4.
Yes.
Build and feed your golden goose. So your golden goose is Heritage District. You just saw it. You're facing about a 350% increase in your revenue generation from that site. Keep working on this. Keep focused on this. It just strikes me that this is just a golden opportunity. And again, this is what your numbers look like. Combined scenarios. So again, these are pretty conservative in how we're thinking about these numbers. I understand you all got a copy of this book tonight. Congratulations, great book. Chuck, recovering civil engineer, super interesting guy. We worked a lot with Strong Towns just to try and work with our partners in local government. Many of us, all of us on the Urban 3 team had roles in local government. We're either planners or managers of some fashion. And we know how the system works, and we know how it doesn't work. So we want to make it better because our hearts are in local government. And then I think you've all seen this before, but this is, the Venn diagram of wants and needs. It doesn't, it's not always possible to have all the things we want, right? This is not an easy message to deliver to constituents, but it is real because the alternative is that you raise taxes to the point where they don't want to live here, right? So think differently about how you're using your land assets. This is me if you want to reach out. Thank you.
I had one, initially you said that we're at a 1-to-1,
Yeah.
maybe approaching 1-to-2. But
Almost at 1-to-2.
But isn't the ideal 1-to-5?
Yeah, 1-to-5.
So how do we get there?
Yeah, by redeveloping your heritage district.
That will get us to
Yeah.
1-to-5?
Right. The development scenarios you gave us for land use are what we plugged into this model. So if you move forward with the projects that are in the pipeline currently, there's a good chance that you will get to that 350% increase in value.
And if we took another section, let's say whether it was the Northwest Corridor or Rivialon, some of these areas, and went denser, such as those plans, we could get to the 1.1-to-5.
You can get to the 1-to-5 just in the Heritage District, but again, citywide, that's a different scenario, right? You have lots of infill opportunities. So think about each one of those as a savings bond. How do you want to invest that? Think about that as an instrument that you would invest.
So, but essentially, the Heritage District can kind of, I hate to say it this way, but it kind of saves the cake for everybody there.
Well, I think it puts you on a path where you are more economically sustainable in the future.
Right. And then the other parts can be infilled, done right, correctly, maybe as dense, maybe not, but to exceed that, it's,
Right.
okay.
But even just a little bit more density, right? Density is a dirty word, I get it, okay?
Yeah.
But even just a little bit more is gonna make those properties cash flow for you, right? Not the developer, but for you as a local government. You're providing the services and the roads, the water and sewer. You want that property to cash flow for you.
And Councilmember Torgerson, just for a point of clarity, we provided Urban 3 the master plan from the redevelopment plan, and so that's how they were able to make determinations on the land use. anyone's looking, you can find that in the redevelopment plan.
Kind of your maximum build-out scenario. Other questions?
So essentially, our goal is to maximize not density, but maximize the use in the Heritage District to get to a 1 to 5 to where we can pay for the infrastructure for the rest of the city, and then we can focus on developing other pockets and projects within the town and not be in a deficit. Like that'll essentially stabilize the future of Gilbert, and then we can pick and choose which projects we want to participate in and where we want to focus our time and attention and money.
I think that's a nice synopsis. I think it puts you in a posture where you are financially sustainable as a community. That would always be your goal, right? I mean, you don't deficit spend in your own houses. You think about that, right? Can I take that vacation this year? Can I buy that new car, right?
Sounds like what we need to do for Gilbert to retire.
To clarify, Heather, I think those are great questions to remember and put into context. The Heritage District is 3/4 of a mile. 0.3, sorry.
Square miles.
I even rounded up, out of 72 square miles. So I think what Heather is sharing is the value in looking at however we can insulating development through things like mixed use and other products that bring about different types of uses to increase that value per acre proposition. But that starts to solve for the Heritage District, and to Councilmember Torgerson's prior question, again, that starts to solve for the Heritage District. If you were to put these revenues in context with the town, that doesn't address infrastructure challenges in the rest of the 72 square miles. So obviously we need to start somewhere. But I think that this is a conversation that I know when we saw it the first time when we did the council exercise in August, it was a really eye-opening experience for the town. And so we wanted to bring it to Redevelopment Commission and Planning Commission, so as you're reviewing cases, you can think about it in addition to the lenses that you already view it through this lens. And then our intent is to be able to use this model and think differently about other projects throughout the town as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, you're not
Shouldn't that be staff really steering the developers that way?
Well, they already kind of are. And, the biggest question is how do we translate this theory to citizens? You saw it right there. Multifamily is millions of dollars per acre.
But Noah, I think the point would be that as a commissioner, and you, that everybody take a step back and look at what they like, what they want personally, and take a look back and say, as the whole, how do we do something that is not overly impactful, let's say, to a particular neighborhood? You don't have a 4-story apartment next to a bunch of 1-story houses, but to maybe take that bite and go back and say, well, the world's changing. How do we justify intensifying something along the 202? I mean, I know people that, no, it should be I used to be able to see corn there. And well, that's all good and fine, but at some point, we're gonna have to recognize that and relay in each one of our individual positions that to continue the life, the reason you moved here, the roads, the parks, all the things that we expect to afford them, we're gonna have to give up something, and it doesn't have to be your left arm. It has to be maybe a project over next to a freeway, or something in the Heritage District that's 6 stories maybe, or something in Rivulon that you don't necessarily really like, but that's gonna help propel the lifestyle that everybody moved here for. And I think it's communication from every person to not shy away from the conversation, be like, oh, okay, I understand you don't like apartments, and I don't like apartments, but at a certain point, you have to have them. And, with new housing here, starting at $450,000, it's attainable for some, it's not affordable for all. We're gonna have to rethink a little bit about what we expect and communicate it in each role that we have.
And I think understanding where density makes sense. Where do we want to look at the balance of uses, and where do we want to look at different types of uses? And I think that's where this really becomes a really helpful tool in understanding exactly what those types of products bring to the community.
Correct.
Are we thinking that we want to go a little bit more dense in the Heritage District?
That's a big question, and I think that that's a question that's in front of both commissions and the council to ultimately provide some direction to staff for when and where it makes the most sense.
Well, but I think what's interesting is, if you look at the collab, that's not density.
No, and that's the value per acre, right? The
Right.
the total
So-
taxable value per acre.
So that's when you
You're
get in
taking a
those
building and-
conversations with the developers, we're like,
Right.
well, we don't need office. It's like, I'd probably argue opposite looking at this.
Right.
In the East Valley has very little good-looking office that's decent, so I think that's why it does really well as well.
But when you come to, let's say, I would prefer it to be fee simple rather than apartments, but X amount of people living on an acre with those state shared revenues, all the things that come in from that, that's important, the money they spend, the money they generate locally. If you had.
Right, you need density to support the business in the area, absolutely.
Yeah,
But I'm just
in the right area.
I'm just taking that collab building, I mean, that's eye-opening to me that, wow, that's generating what it is as an office building, in
Don't you
essence
wish they
with
didn't strip
retail.
away
And
our
I think
rental
more
tax right
specifically
now?
mixed use.
Right, so.
It doesn't have to be one or the other, and I think planning's done an excellent job.
It would be interesting for me, I mean, kind of fast forward a year, 2 years from now, to look at what the Tyler's doing with that mixed use and how they've built that out, and then be able to say, okay, let's drop this into that same model and see, did that get a spike, right?
That can be found out quickly, can't
Is it possible to do,
Last year.
to look at the collab and see if there was mixed use and they did go one floor higher and they did apartments or did something up there? How much that would have affected, or if that, how much more positive it would have affected things?
We can run almost endless scenarios, which I think is a useful tool. The other thing we're developing, and I told staff about this today, is what I'm fondly calling a municipal pro forma tool. So developers will bring you their pro forma, they'll show it to you, they'll say, this project doesn't pencil, we need X number of dollars of TIF or some kind of abatement or subsidy. We've developed a tool that will arm local government to have that conversation on the revenue infrastructure services side of the balance sheet. And so that should be, I think, something that can really help you guide decisions that are more economic in nature, at least including the economics in the conversation. Because frequently, we all know these conversations become more about the typology and the density and the height and other things, and not so much about the economics for the community. So that's one tool that we can use to also use this design analysis.
That was about $3 million.
Yeah, Gilbert, the Heritage District won't bail you out, but it's going to be an important pivot point for you as a community, as you think differently about your land assets and how to use them.
I think what you're saying is that if we're gonna sustain ourselves long-term, we have to go high density. It's inevitable.
I didn't say that.
You did say that?
No, I think you have to have some density in this
Well, I
community.
mean, some density, not everything, but you have to have more of it, is what I meant to say.
Yeah, I think you have to have some density, and I don't even think it needs to be high density, because I think of high density as like 30-story concrete and steel construction. I think you could move into the up to 10 stories in some areas and achieve densities that would carry you economically. I don't think it has to be all or nothing.
I didn't mean that, I meant that you're gonna see more high density.
Yeah.
And we see a lot of apartments in Chandler and Tempe and Mesa, and now I kind of understand why they're being built, is they need that revenue to sustain themselves going forward.
Right.
I'm assuming.
Well, in Tempe, my understanding from talking with people and staff over the last few days, and the manager there was my mentor for many years, but I understand that Tempe took a long time to get to the point where they were ready to build a lot of height. So there was a kind of a building up to that, right, as a community, and in particular their downtown. I don't think that was an overnight thing, and I think the same thing could happen here in Gilbert, where you will gradually embrace more density in certain areas where it fits, to Mary's point, right? Some areas of the city it's not gonna fit. You're certainly not gonna put it in the backyard of somebody over here, right? Where I came through all these neighborhoods, the named neighborhoods, you're not gonna put it there. Of course you're not. But you
But a
might
big
put
part
it
of-
in Heritage.
Excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt. A big part of Tempe is ASU's increased attendance. I know Dr. Kroger there is big on trying to get as many in there as he can, get as many educated. So they built that higher density to support the increase in attendance. It's justifiable.
Yeah,
Part of
for
that
sure.
problem over there, some of the buildings you're anticipating being Tempe are owned by ASU and generate nothing for Tempe.
Yeah.
Most of those buildings
You're
you're
correct, there are a bunch of owned by, it's on
They lease
ASU
the
land.
land and the people that get it don't pay anything.
Exactly.
I think one of the examples that was really interesting, that Urban 3 provided is the Whole Foods project that you saw in there. Obviously, that's not a project in Gilbert, but what that highlights is the value of a mixed-use project, because it has a residential component and a commercial component, and that's something that we've had quite a bit
And
of.
grocery.
And grocery, and have had
Yeah.
some discussions around. And to your question, I think that there's always a multitude of factors that play into whether or not the market supports multifamily, whether or not it's zoned for that, whether or not the surrounding uses make sense, whether or not, I mean, there's any number of things, and so I don't know if it's as binary as an outcome that could come from that. It's always weighed in terms of impact, surrounding uses, any number of other things, if that makes sense. So to your point, I don't know if the other cities made those decisions based on what they thought would come as a result. Probably more so a blend of what do we have in inventory, what do we see that we need in inventory, what's the housing market like, any number of those conversations.
Makes sense.
We talk a good comprehensive plan in America, but we very infrequently exercise or execute a good comprehensive plan. This tool will allow you to just have another layer of data. It's just a more compelling discussion when you understand the numbers.
Well, and we're using these kind of tools as we consider the projects that we're completing in Gilbert. So as we're looking towards a third parking structure, what assets do we need to include in that do generate revenue? Because otherwise that asset is simply a liability for us. And then Heather, you mentioned even that most parking structures that you're seeing now are not the angled ramp parking, but flat structures that can now be repurposed in future if ever needed.
Yeah, I think there's so many question marks when it comes to transportation right now, not to go on a complete detour, no pun intended, but I think the problem with transportation right now is understanding autonomous vehicles for one thing. What will the demand side of that look like for layover parking, for curbside? There's a lot of considerations there, so parking is always a little bit of a tenuous public investment, but I think it needs to be really carefully considered right now. And I was driving through Heritage today, and there's quite a bit of publicly owned parking in that district already. And one thing you can think about is like, how would you activate that ground level floor of a future public parking garage? So, you know, you could do a lot worse than to put a grocery store in the basement, right? Or in the first level, excuse me, yeah.
That Whole Foods is in Tempe, right?
Yes. Correct. I think that's what Mary said, yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you took that and then on that property, made it include the parking that we would make that same development include, what would that number be? Because I think that's where there's a lot of struggle here is like more density, but we make it so hard for developers to come in and kind of pitch something different or get these deviations. And so you couldn't just take that Whole Foods building and plop it in Gilbert and expect the same outcome because we require so much parking per square foot of commercial and so much parking per bedroom in the residential. So that number wouldn't be the same because it would have a greater land, like piece of land that it's sitting on to meet all of the requirements that we have here. So it's not apples to apples, like you couldn't take that, put it here and expect the same outcome.
Possibly. So I can't speak to that particular development. I haven't been in that, but Whole Foods has built those all over the US and typically they have a parking component that's either partially underground or fully underground and at grade. And so they do have parking in them.
But
and
it's
I don't know
not
what the
the
requirements
same.
are. What's
Like,
that? Yeah, it may not be the same.
they have easier, because they have more people could walk there or take some kind of public transportation. So it's not, their parking standards are not as,
rigorous as ours, but even if it was worth half the amount, 25 million, it would still pencil out and make sense. And I think the point, what I'm getting from this is that fastest ROI that the town has, return on investment for infrastructure and getting people to come here, is the Heritage District. Because we own a lot of the real estate, somebody has been acquiring it for a very long time. And use the road analogy of, if we're in the deficit of all the roads and the repairs and maintenance on it. So if you think about 2 miles exiting the freeway to get to downtown Gilbert, that's where a lot of money is spent.
Yes.
If we can maximize the return on investment, it's the quickest and easiest thing we could do to offset a lot of the other expenses that the town has.
You also don't know today what kind of momentum that will create in the market. So somebody said in a meeting yesterday that he doesn't like to come to Heritage because he likes to ride his bike and there's never a place to park. That's what he said, which made me laugh, because I drove around there today, I was like, wow, this looks pretty well parked. One of the things that's really interesting about these kinds of uses is when you activate them, they often have this sort of duplicative effect on surrounding properties. So it's hard to measure that, nigh impossible. But we've seen it over and over and over again. Projects take time to develop and develop a following interest. City of St. Louis Park in the Twin Cities Metroplex did a massive project like this about 15 years ago. It is just now starting to kind of come into its own to really generate interest in that area, and it was a really underdeveloped area. So Heritage probably won't take that long because there's already something there, you know? So that's hard to measure, but I think that has an impact as well. So, yes.
So I think the presentation was awesome. But I guess the information was very enlightening, but I think it is, like, everybody here needs to be careful. My takeaway is that density is positive and it would be super helpful, and obviously the Heritage District is a low-hanging fruit. But I think taking it past the line of then dictating use types to the developers to private developers is not gonna help, it's gonna hurt. Like, I've heard people, oh, we like the collab, the office is great. No one's building suburban office right now, and because of the demand side, there's no demand for suburban office. No one will build suburban office right now. So you will not see another collab project for quite some time. Whole Foods will not go to downtown Gilbert, I'll tell you right now, the demographics do not support it within a 1, 3, 5 mile trade. They want higher traffic counts, I've talked to them. So you won't see that particular project. Like, I think you have to be careful. Yes, density is a good thing, but the developer will tell you what the demand side is. And I don't think you can shove them in a box on what the use type is, because it'll never get built. So
But you can push FAR, you can push some of those things.
100%, yeah, and I think if you give them more of a creative box to work within, that's what I hear you saying.
Yes.
Yeah, give them the creative box, I just wanna be careful, like, we can say we love this Tempe project, this Whole Foods, collab was a success, great. But you can't just go, we want that. I think you have to be very careful to define a box that gives them the creativity, but then hear them when they're like, no, I can't build the Whole Foods small footprint's 20 to 30,000 foot. I can't build a 30,000 foot box here and expect to lease it. And we have to be receptive when they go, it won't work. Like, I think that needs to be, you gotta be careful. Give them creativity, give them the tools to build a cool, higher density project. Or middle density project, I guess, in the grand scheme of things.
TJ, I think a lot of the developers too, they try to just do apartments or just do one thing for simplicity with working with the municipalities, that they don't want the complexity of, having to go through every single phase for a restaurant, for retail, for single family use. It's like, I just wanna build something simple and quick and then get out of here and move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Right, well, and I don't disagree with you that office is tough, but I think where we get stuck is developers wanting to come in and develop 50, 100, 200,000 square feet and then lease the entire thing out to one tenant versus coming in and going like a collab, which is actually more parceled out. Now, I'm not saying that needs to be done or we need to direct developers, but maybe encourage that type of thing where it's like, hey, we need smaller office for development, because when you get walkability, when you get a condensed area like that, it bodes to
the lived life, you know,
Yep.
in all one space. So I'm not arguing against that.
No,
I'm saying-
I deal with it all the time, I agree, I mean, I work directly with the developers in a lot of situations, but, and a lot of times I'm the one tasked with leasing it out, so I have to handle all the rejections. But no, I don't disagree, it's just my counter to that would be the underwriting significantly changes. Like their ability to pencil certain numbers, if you're budgeting or planning for an average office size of 2,500 feet versus a corporate HQ, your underwriting just got flipped on its head. What you can borrow for, what you can sell it for, like the whole thing just flips.
And your
Very
parking
different.
requirements are a big part of that.
Huh?
Your parking requirements are a big part of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but especially for housing, parking never pencils. So I think this is like, it's a question mark for you. How do you handle that into the future? So those regulatory levers you can pull, that's where you have the most ability to shape these things. You can't control the market. You can't make people go back to work in an office. So you have to think about how you're activating the space, how you're making really important public investments, but very strategically, right? Yeah.
I think we also make it difficult by having people in entitlements for 9 to 12 months, just trying to get zoning. Like, on the private side, I don't really like to do projects in Gilbert. I think they're unnecessarily difficult sometimes, which was my motivation to get on the planning commission, was like, we can, as a person, as a resident of Gilbert for over 20 years, like, we can create some change and have developers want to come to the table with the town and be able to build something great, but the town has to give them something in return. A year in entitlements is not, it's just not motivating to work on a project here. And there are so many factors that go into that timeline, and developers, we take our time on resubmittals too, so I'm not saying that it's totally the town, but some of our, development standards are a little bit bold, and the town's ability to adjust or be able to look at something as a whole and not just say, but it doesn't fit within this table in the zoning code, and so now you have to go through this cumbersome process, like, that's not helpful. And we're gonna run into that trying to fill all these little infill pieces, because infill is hard to begin with, but then when you put these development standards that are set for kind of larger developments or more typical developments onto this property that's so constrained, then developers walk away. They're like, I just can't even make anything work here. And so I think that there are some changes there that need to happen to get to where we want to get to in the Heritage District and all over town, these infill pieces. Because there are quite a few tiny pieces that got just left behind when a subdivision came in. And this was a small little commercial weird parcel that it just needed to be there at the time, I don't know, and now it's taking forever for somebody to come in. So we need to be able to be more flexible with those things.
Thank you for your thoughtful questions. Appreciate your attention, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Just to put a quick bow on all of this, again, we wanted to bring Urban 3 out here because we're trying to shift the way that we're thinking about being a fiscally sustainable community in the long term. And so we'll continue bringing back these conversations and ideas to not only amongst staff, but certainly amongst you as commissioners, to help us as we proceed with that endeavor. So we have one of two options. We can move into the parking presentation right now, or we can take a 5-minute break. 5 minutes? Okay.
Touch on tire starts.
Like for my teeth, and then I'm like, I thought I get it, I'm like.
this and one of that, you know.
Are we ready to wrap up our evening talking about parking? The most emotionally charged thing we can talk about? Okay, are we ready? Okay, so we wanted to have just a quick update and conversation about shared parking. We know, Planning Commission, that you don't always oversee projects within the Heritage District, but when we come in for a rezone, planned area development, shared parking questions do come up, so we want to be able to talk about that. In Gilbert and as a best practice for downtowns, we try to think of parking as your first and last impression. And so as we look at our shared model, we continue to think about what that means. So why does Gilbert have a shared parking model? It's ultimately because it provides a more walkable urban environment where you can park once and go to multiple places. It maximizes that sales tax revenue generation that we heard from Heather about, maximizes the opportunity to utilize valuable developable land. It can create efficiencies through shared uses, so that reduces the amount of structured parking that's necessary, and overall it increases development value. In Gilbert, we've had a shared parking model since 2005 when the Village Center zoning was instituted. We've done 2 comprehensive master plans, one in 2015 and one in 2021. The shared parking model allows for an administrative use permit. So a development can come in, they can apply for an administrative use permit to off-site park up to 100% of their parking requirements, so long as it's a non-residential use. So how does that work? They come in, they apply for that. Planning staff and redevelopment staff work together to identify what amount of excess parking we currently have that has not been committed through other administrative use permits. We verify that and then allow them to proceed with their application. The parking master plan that we have was developed in 2021, and it shows our existing parking supply numbers. You'll hear a little bit of an update here, but we have about 5,400 parking spaces total between private and public spaces. If we were to look at a map of where those parking spaces are, it looks something like this, except for Heritage Park, which you've seen. We estimate that that project, which is just about 10 acres, removed 584 spaces from that, the vacant lot that had the decomposed granite parking stalls on it, and 41 spaces from the Burger King. In the meantime, we did add, we took those millings from one site and moved them over just west of the university building and added about 255 parking spaces. There is on-street parking as well throughout the entire Heritage District. And one thing to note, as we look at these counts here, go back. Go to this real quick. Today, if we look at just our excess inventory, again, parking that has not been committed to a project, we have approximately 600 stalls. We do have a couple of projects that are in planning that we're anticipating utilizing that shared parking, which would reduce us to about 300 stalls. This is, again, just parking inventory. So let's get to what adequacy means versus parking inventory. One other note, we just wanted to share this. We do have an interactive map. Gosh, how many times have you gone to a place you have no idea how or where to park? Like, we're trying to inform the public by sharing these parking locations that are free parking at this moment, as well as the rideshare locations. And if you click on it, it tells you how many stalls. We would like to take that a step further. We heard from our counterparts in Tempe that they're working with Google to actually help map you to a parking location when you go downtown. So we'd like to mirror something like that in the future. As we look at future parking needs, and we looked at the redevelopment plan and what was anticipated for land uses. Then we applied that to how many parking stalls, if we were to take on all of these parking stalls tomorrow, how many parking stalls do we need to build in order for this main core portion of the district to be sustainable? You'll see the SCs, those mean self-contained, meaning that on those projects, we have already anticipated them self-parking.
And so in order to meet the demand in the future as we build out, we're anticipating about 2,100 stalls. Now that doesn't mean that Gilbert has to build all of those stalls. That can be shared between Gilbert and the development community, and we're working towards understanding what that balance is in that core portion. So again, just a couple of important notes. The parking master plan not only talks about the supply and adequacy today, it also talks about parking management strategies, which I'll touch on in just a minute. I really highly suggest, and I can send this out afterwards, there's an active parking management in the Heritage District video that just talks about how do we better manage and facilitate parking. And then the great news is this. So again, our parking master plan was finished in 2021. 2024 is a very different time. We have had 5.5 million visits to downtown in the last year. So you think about that, and you think about the impact that that has on parking. We've asked Walker Consultants to create an update to our parking conditions. So they were actually here in March. They were here all through the weekend. So they were able to take direct parking counts, not only on a Friday night, but a Saturday morning when we have the farmer's market, and really understand again, what is that parking inventory, but even more important, what the adequacy is. So adequacy is the question of how long does it take you to park. So we have a parking structure that has 500 stalls, just as a scenario, and 425 of them are used. How do you get to those other 75 stalls? You have to drive around, right? So that decreases the adequacy, even though you have the parking supply. And so we're asking them to tell us, what is the real number for adequate parking that we have on hand today? To take that one step further, as I mentioned, the parking master plan calls out parking management strategies. So now we can think about things like parking enforcement. We've had a conversation with council in August about this at the council workshop. We're going to be bringing back additional considerations for them in December. But let's just talk about that parking structure again. 500 stalls. Let's say you have 100 employees in the area utilizing that parking structure. What if they all parked at the top of that because now you're enforcing parking where your employees are utilizing that top of the structure and it lessens the amount of time you have to drive around as a visitor. So there's a lot of opportunity for enforcing parking. The master plan also called out the length of time that people were parking in prime parking spots. So this is parking spots right adjacent to a business. They're really easy to get to surface lots. And we found on average that they were parking there a minimum of 4 hours. Those people are not those 5.5 million visits or 1.2 million visitors. It's individuals who work in the district, it's our students, and they're incredibly important to the ecosystem of our Heritage District. But what if we could park them at a different location so that those prime spaces open up and that curb can turn over, those parking spaces can turn over, and we can generate more revenue for our Heritage District. That's what parking management strategies can do for us. Same thing with time limits. As we see increase in particularly during and after COVID, Uber Eats, DoorDash, Grubhub, retail, Target, I can order online and pick up curbside. Those time limit parkings are time limit parking is gonna help with that. We've already started some curbside management. You guys have seen probably the rideshare loading zones. Those are heavily utilized. We have exact numbers from this spring to share with you, so we're excited about that. But that curbside management also requires curbside management for commercial loading, and we haven't gotten there yet, so it's an opportunity for us. It's great to build these multi-million-dollar parking structures, but what happens when people can't find how to get to them? So that's where the signage and wayfinding comes in play. City of Bethel Price has been working diligently on a comprehensive wayfinding plan that was recently completed, and we're going into fabrication for that wayfinding signage, again, to help people find the services like parking that they need throughout the district. We're having discussions with council about how do we fund this long term. It's great that we've built these facilities, but how do we, in the long term, pay for the operations and management of them? And then certainly, we love our special events in downtown. They're very important to to the atmosphere, to visitation, and again, increasing that sales tax revenue, but we have to be able to park them. So again, we're taking some of these strategies and recommendations from the parking master plan and having those comprehensive conversations with council on how do we prioritize these strategies. It's gonna take staff. If you want to enforce parking, you have to have somebody out there enforcing it. So it's gonna take additional staffing, additional funding, to really be thoughtful about that parking management. And as we heard, you know, we met with a group of downtowns from across the state on Monday. And one of our downtown counterparts literally said, I will never drive to your downtown because I can never find parking. It's always an interesting conversation for me because I work in downtown, right? And I have season tickets to Hale Theater, so I'm down there, you know, 9 months on a Friday or Saturday, and I've never once had to drive around for parking. So I guess afterwards, if you want to know where I park, we can talk offline. But we want everyone to be able to know how to find those parking spaces, and we want it to be adequate parking. So what does the future of parking look like? We do have in our recent infrastructure bond, we bonded for a third parking structure. We're looking to right-size that garage. Again, to the conversation we've had with Urban 3. What benefit does a single use provide? You know, are there opportunities to recapture some revenue with that? Certainly understanding where it goes and how many spaces we need right now. But in the meantime, we're also looking at adding additional temporary lots. So we have a project named Vaughn Ventilator that will connect Vaughn Avenue, and it will parallel the UPRR and it will tie in Bailey. At the end of that road is a detention basin. We are looking to move that detention basin. We can then fill in the current detention basin and use that as temporary parking. So staff is hyper-focused on how we phase our projects in order to ensure that not only we have the inventory for parking, but that parking adequacy. I mentioned commercial loading zones being an important part of this. We certainly have had some congestion when we have, you know, deliveries happening in the middle of the street. And then we're asking the question, what is the development responsibility? How much do we want them to contribute? And that's certainly not a staff level decision, that's a council and policy level question that we'll continue to ask as we converse with them in December. And so I'm really opening this up, not only for questions, but you know, any feedback that you may have, ways that we can make our parking better, so that we can bring it to council. We certainly have Vice Mayor and Councilmember Torgerson here today, but we want to incorporate your thoughts and comments into the dialogue that we have with council in December. So, parking, first and last impression. Questions about how we do it, thoughts on it?
Well, my thoughts are that the way to find that parking is the most important and an educating component to people that are coming there. And I don't know whether that means like the signage as you're coming into it, that it distinctly shows a colored map of where you would go. Because I don't think it's really that big of a deal for most people to park, you know, like at the back of where the college is and then just walk down there. Whenever I go down, I park at the way back of the parking lot where we just developed that big box thing we call the apartments, because I like to be as far away from people as possible, because I don't trust them. But you know, so to me, it's like, that's not a big deal. And I think there's a lot of consumers that wouldn't mind if it was clear and concise, here's where you go. And I don't know, I think implementing technology that shows, whether that's directly with an app, but also in a parking garage where you could actually show which floor has how many sites open and things like that. Like when you go to the airport and you always see the thing that says closed, and then you see some guy that knows better and he drives in there. And you know, he's just gonna drive around, miss his flight, that's his prerogative. But if you have some way to take technology, I think that's the key that we need to begin to push into this, because it will help. Consumers now all are adept at using this, even old guys like us that are using apps for everything.
I'm young and beautiful, refer to
Well,
yourself.
I've meant us, like me and young, not spry young fellas like yourself. But yeah, so I think that the technology and the knowledge, however we translate to the public of where these spaces are, how to get to them and then how to navigate out is key.
To what he said, I believe it's the Glendale Galleria in California. I remember going through there and it would say, L1 and give numbers specifically to what's open, so, cause everybody would push for those first few spots, and boom, you're up, just going, and parking was turning over fast. And if you've ever been in that place, it's insane. It was built in 1978, I think, or 77, and it is still absolutely insanely busy. But they get their people in and out.
Chairman, Commissioner Torgerson, I really appreciate that comment, and we are certainly looking at additional technologies so much that we're even seeing sensor technologies that can be installed in a stall to tell you if there's a car there or not, and you can literally know exactly which stall you're going to. So the technology's available. It's, how do we, again, what are the trade-offs in cost? And how do we ultimately fund this?
We got something in there that shocks teenagers when they go in there.
I have not seen anything like that yet.
Working on it, yeah.
I was gonna say, I never had a problem parking downtown, and I'm down there quite frequently, so it's not that difficult yet. It sounds, from the sounds of your presentation, you're heading towards parking meters or paid parking?
Commissioner, I can't answer that question. That's certainly a policy level question. I don't think we've necessarily had conversations about meters, but certainly about time limited parking, enforcing time limited parking in order for a curb to turn over. And certainly how we fund paid parking is really up to council, but there's a lot of ways that it can be funded. And so I'll share this, it doesn't necessarily have to be I'm a visitor and I'm gonna go and pay at the meter or pay by an app. It can be a parking management district that enacts a tax on, a receipt, your sales. As you go to a restaurant, it can be fee in lieu, where we, again, put that cost back to development. There's a lot of opportunities. And we shared some of those with council in August and hope to have a little bit more direction as we continue to talk with them on how do we fund it long term, because the reality is parking structures are very costly endeavors.
I think on a long enough timeline, it has to be paid because you need to create a financial incentive to people to turn those parking spots over. It's simple.
Is it into the guidelines, it says that you can't charge for parking?
Chair Kendall, the guidelines do not call out the inability to charge for parking. However, in some of our development agreements, we have written stipulations that the developers can't charge for parking, largely because what we don't want to happen is we're building, maintaining, and operating all of this parking, and if I'm an individual going to visit one single development site and I have to pay to park there, but I don't have to pay to park anywhere else, I'm gonna go wherever else and I don't have to pay. So right now, at this moment, we're trying to create a level playing field for all of the parking inventory that we manage.
For future development, no on-site parking is required for retail, but residential or multifamily, it is required.
Commissioner Bigelow, yes, so all residential requires on-site parking at this time.
And then is it first come, first serve, or we're trying to build parking garages before we keep building retail?
Let me think about how to answer this. Are you asking Commissioner Bigelow, like as a business or as a development comes in, it's just whatever available inventory, if a developer comes in tomorrow and there's available inventory, they can apply for the administrative use permit.
Yes.
But what you're saying is, if another developer comes in and that inventory is no longer there, they could not.
Yes.
And that would be the reality. We can't allow parking if we don't have the parking available.
And I'm naive and ignorant when it comes to building parking garages and especially going underground. However, with residential, I'm shocked at how cheap it is to build basements and that not every home in Arizona has one. Have we gotten hard numbers on how much it is to go underground?
I'm not aware of any members, Commissioner Bigelow, that we have had recently, but certainly as we go through this process of a third parking structure, that will be something we examine and we'll have better numbers then.
More than it costs to go up.
Yeah.
Is the answer.
Yeah,
But
I would argue that, I really would, but that's just a talker. When I build something, I'm gonna go down and have my own parking. It's cheap.
Well, and saying basements are cheap, that's relative compared to if I'm a builder building 300 houses, and I don't have to by any code, I'm not gonna do it. Cause I'll sell them for the same amount.
And it's been probably 4 or 5 years since I've done a garage, and it was about 35,000 a stall. So they're cheap. And I don't even wanna know what escalation puts to that, but I've worked in downtown Phoenix, I've worked in downtown Scottsdale, I've had to pay to park as an employee in both environments, which is just a statement. Take it for what we wanna consider, but if you are in those, density is a dirty word, we said, but you're in those more high density environments, there are maybe those shared parking agreements there, then you as an employer, you are sharing those parking situations, and if I wanted to park, I had to pay, or I had to figure something else out, and that's just, I guess, something that you become comfortable with once that just becomes the normal. I don't know, just a statement.
yeah, I've been pretty outspoken on parking. So I think I bug Amanda like maybe once a year about the Vaughn garage. You probably know where I'm headed with this, but I think like town could take it to an extreme and really start to ask, could it even potentially not be a town problem to build a new garage? There's a lot of equity groups right now that are solely out there just purchasing parking structures because they want to manage it, charge, and they will. Valet. No, most of them don't, but a lot of them in downtown Phoenix right now picked up a lot of parking structures because they want the management of the parking structures, and then they increase rates. I think the town could go to the extreme and say maybe we look at choosing a couple lots to have privatized parking structures and put it on the developer, and then the town never has to worry about how to service, maintain, and upkeep the parking structure, leave it to private to figure out how to do it.
I don't know if that's a good idea, because they're thinking about bottom line, so they're gonna increase prices as much as they can.
As much as they can, and as much as demand
All they
supports,
think
right?
about is bottom line.
Right.
So I would totally disagree with having a private company come in and running the parking.
And they own, operate, if they wanna charge, they charge, if they wanna risk $40 a stall and they don't get anybody, that's on them, and then they lower prices.
Sometimes you have no choice but to pay.
Right, exactly, when it gets really busy, you may not have a choice, right? So I think that's like the extreme. I was surprised on Heather's presentation. It'd be interesting to see if you've started to analyze the underlying values of parking structures that do pay. I didn't see that on there, but I'm sure you have it. But I do also think there's an alternative too where, I mean, we've talked about it. I know the Vaughn garage is slated for power, water, sewer on the first row parking stalls along, in between Oso, running north-south all the way to Culinary Dropout. There's a couple projects, San Paseo in California, one in Texas, that they took the first bay of parking structures and converted it into small footprint retail. So I think if the town wanted to build it, they should plan retail on the ground floor at a minimum, and that could, just retail revenues by itself could cover, especially the demand in the Heritage District, could cover the cost of ongoing maintenance and upkeep of the parking structure. Or you could just privatize that component. I think you could commercial condo off the retail ground floor, maintain control and ownership of floors 2 through 5 and behind the retail, and then bring in private individual for the retail on the front. So I think there's a hybrid too that would work.
And Commissioner Clausen, I appreciate that comment. We did, when we built the Hernway Garage, we did build it to a standard in which that first level could eventually be transitioned into retail if the town ever chooses to do so.
Wasn't it, the previous council that said they didn't want to be landlords, correct?
Yes, that
Which
is-
doesn't mean the current council wouldn't be landlords, I'm just saying.
Yes, that's correct.
Nobody's saying anything crazy.
I'm not saying I would be a slumlord.
But that's why I brought up, you could commercial condo it off and sell just that.
Right,
that
or you
piece,
just public
right?
private
You could
partners,
just
some
sell
of these
that
things.
piece and then you'd collect, I don't know how the town
Well,
would handle the revenue.
I think the $60
maybe.
million hole that it creates to build it is,
Right.
that's what needs to be addressed, and that's probably a public-private partnership.
Or
If
if
you wanna
you did,
build something big, you gotta build this for everybody.
yeah. Or if the town did front that cost, they could at least get a big chunk back by condoing off the retail on the ground floor, selling that part of it. Then they're not landlords, they at least get a chunk back. I don't know, I think there's a lot of hybrids where parking doesn't have to mean a zero on underlying value. I've got a lot of ideas.
Aren't we already kind of landlords? Because a lot of the leased land downtown, we do own and then just companies lease it, so the same model could apply.
We're not leasing them.
No, we're not.
We're selling them.
You're selling some flat out, okay.
Except for the SXU, the university building.
Okay, okay.
That's definitely leased from us.
I got a question for you on the rideshare spots that are around the district. So I remember when they first started building those things, we lost a few spaces at each location. Does the town know if those rideshare locations have been beneficial and helped with traffic around the Heritage District? And how exactly do they work? So let's say Friday night I'm leaving Champions and I get onto Lyft or Uber for my ride. Did the town contact those certain places and say anything that comes within the Heritage District, the pickup drop, the pickup location will be at one of those spots compared to like out in front of Champions or wherever else you're coming out of?
Yes, Commissioner Anderson, we worked with the rideshare companies, Uber and Lyft, to designate those spots. Largely because we had individuals stopping on Gilbert Road and just letting people out on Main Street, essentially. And so what happens is if I take a ride to downtown, I can choose which of these 5 locations I want to be dropped off or picked up at. And so we do have, our at the end of the evening, we do certainly have, our police bike team helping people get to those particular locations. But Sydney, so I will share, we were at one point able to get data from both Uber and Lyft on the rideshare and the amount of rideshare, and then they stopped sharing some of that data. But at the time, when it first kicked off, Sydney, do you remember how many ride shares we were having per month approximately?
Per month for drop-off and pickup, between the 5, we were getting approximately 5,000 drop-offs and pickups per month. So we got that data through 2022, and then there was a privacy item with the rideshare companies, and we can no longer get it. But also, we've tracked it with our PD, and the numbers of tickets they've issued for people stopping on Gilbert Road has dropped to almost 0. So that was a way that even though we can't track how many cars we're getting there now, we can see our PD team is no longer issuing those tickets in the extreme amount they were before. So it's successful from at least a safety perspective, even though we may not be able to measure as much the circulation.
So is that incentive enough for the town to create more stops around the district?
We have a phase 2 that's in our capital improvement plan, so at that time, I don't know what year it is, it's within like the next 5 years, we'll reassess those sites and then provide upgrades to them and then look at other opportunities to add more. But it has been incredibly helpful and successful, and it's very easy working with the rideshare companies, and the fact that I'm leaving Champions and it tells you go to the Columber one and it gives you instructions to walk down there, and the riders go and pick up, and it's just a much more efficient process.
And Commissioner Anderson, in the development agreements that we're creating, we have also included, stipulations that they should have rideshare locations, and then subsequently we can work with those rideshare companies to be able to, again, geopin them to a particular area.
I just want to point out how cool it is that you were at Champions. I just want to say.
One place you need a ride share is that place.
You can't leave with Uber, she couldn't drive herself home.
Give me a pickled pig's foot and one of those bags of chips. No problem.
Well, if there are no other parking related questions, certainly you can contact me or Dan or Sydney at any moment. We're happy to
walk you through any comments, questions. Certainly want to share your feedback with council. But ultimately, I just want to say thank you to all of you tonight for spending this time with us, for really helping us think about how we build the future of Gilbert. Your commitment and the thoughts and ideas and leadership that you share is just really paramount. So we're very grateful to you, certainly grateful to Vice Mayor and Councilmember Ferguson, and certainly thankful to all of our staff who helped put today together and for hanging out and listening to these presentations. So thank you. Thank you, Heather, for joining us here in Arizona. Just grateful.
Dan, are you taking us? Very good. What's that?